when I started this. But it is the case, and it's one of the obstacles we got to deal with. Either people have got to get receptive, or things have got to get real bad where all the other options are out, and they'll look at this. And that's what happens with a lot of people, and a lot of times in different circumstances. Everything else is ruled out. Well, hell, I guess we'll go look at that. And that time will come for us.
Then and it'll probably be too late for a lot of people. And stuff.
Is that Mark?
No, this is Ron in Georgia.
Oh, hey, Ron. You kind of sound like Mark. Welcome aboard, man. We haven't had you online in a while with us.
It has been a while. It is so difficult for me to get the 11 to 1 Eastern time slot to just sit here and be on a show live, but I appreciate all of you that do participate.
Well, we appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend with us today. How you doing down there?
I am doing pretty well. Life's, I'm approaching the, I guess, 11-month mark for when I came across you. And I'm just reflecting on the last 10 to 12 months of learning and just growing into all this information and absorbing it from so many different sources. And it's been quite a year, and the 4th of July takes on a whole different context when you understand all of this stuff.
Sure does. Do you feel your personal growth, Ron?
Oh, absolutely. I feel it. As a follow-up to what you were just saying, other than individuals on this show and maybe a couple of other sources, you do feel like you're going through it alone. I can't find hardly anybody. I got one other person I brought on board with this, and it just falls on yours. Otherwise, it's absolutely astounding.
I mean, I'm going to tell you, when I first got a shot to get on Joyce Riley with this years ago when the book came out, I figured this thing would take off and spread like wildfire. Oh boy, was I mistaken.
And I don't even know if you were on Alex Jones, there might be a few that would actually take it by the ears, but I don't know the percentages. It's just really bizarre how so many people are just, I guess, too comfortable with their lives, and they don't want to embrace the fact that they've been lied to their whole lives.
And they're scared to death of these people, but unbeknownst to them, it's only because they're in this condition that they scare the hell out of them. And I think your point is buttressed somewhat by the appearances on John B. Wells. Yeah. We haven't had an onslaught of people from that huge audience come on here. Couple, but not many.
It's amazing, but you keep going on, and forums like this are just so beneficial to see people get it for the first time and throw out resources. And I have a couple I wanted to throw out for people. Anyway, yeah, it's just astounding how few people seem to resonate with this. When I prayed about it and was led to you, I had already been digesting some of the state national stuff from the bad sources for several months, and I knew something wasn't right. And when I finally heard the true message, it just clicked. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. But I can imagine a Todd Collender it taking some time, and he has to set aside the time and be able to absorb it and to ask these questions and to go through it. And maybe I'll send him a follow-up email as well, but he certainly has his hands full too. You're right.
Yeah, it was Ron. I mean, two people here. Anthony went down and met him at the 10th Circuit, and Ron had a relationship with him email, and you copied me on something you sent him, and that was my end to his email, and that's where all that came from. And I mean, I'm not dissing Todd at all. I mean, I totally understand, especially somebody that's made law as their career to the point he's international law. He, worked with Cuba. He lives in the Bahamas, all that kind of stuff. And now this comes along and you're going, well, pretty much your whole career has been based on fraud, and it's difficult for people.
Yeah, it's difficult. My former CPA, who was a good friend and a conservative, I mean, I hardly talk to him anymore because I think deep inside he doesn't want to admit that his entire industry and profession is a sham,
Yep.
and that's
These
probably one of the big obstacles.
I know that that's got to be a big obstacle with people. You know, I mean, I've had to try and project this into message recipients, but that's one of the conclusions I'd come to. They just can't overcome the fact that their whole damn life's been a lie.
Yeah.
Understandable. That's understandable. Okay.
And then how are you going to make your livelihood? And you know, you have to actually sign the forms and go to work every day and do it.
Well,
And
we hadn't had one except for our mutual buddy John. We haven't had any repercussions from this on any level except driving and traveling.
Yeah, but
yeah,
the
and that's
moral
kind of the
implications. I'm sorry, one quick comment. The moral implications of them continuing to sign their name and continuing to go to work every day, knowing that their entire livelihood is a fraud.
Right.
So.
And then what about the next time? You see, here's what it is now it's what I tell y'all. I've never told anybody to do this the whole time I've been doing it because I realize it's your decision. Okay. And, but those people that get confronted with this have to go back and reconcile all of that. And I know it's got to be a real big deal with people. Now, Ron, nobody that we know of has had any problems of getting fired because they put in a W8BEN and stuff. And like I said, John is the only example we know of getting something canceled, and then he can't get answers. Well, why? Well, they stay on mute. Okay.
Yeah, they're not going to answer that question. And yeah, that episode was just a really good episode for him to talk about the opportunity cost that he had been through and just some of the challenges. And all of us in this audience face that because there are things that we don't do. There are things that we intentionally make our lives more difficult trying to deal with the banking system and traveling, as Paul was just saying. We intentionally make it more hard, but it's the right thing to do if you're going to come out of Babylon.
Well, you're standing on principles, and I always admire that. I'm that way myself. So I appreciate the people that will put their principles up there and pick up the Excalibur and start swinging it, to whatever ends. So all I know is that you put this in front of people to let them know they've got a choice that they didn't know they had. So whether they take it or not, but see, here's the problem they got, Ron, is if they don't take it, they've got to live with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's hard for people right there, I believe.
And I have a litmus. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, let's get Nastasha's comment in.
I just wanted to add to what Ron and you were saying is there's the gentleman in Switzerland who's suing Pfizer and suing the president of Switzerland. And he stated for himself and so many others, but he did do it. He goes, I had to confront myself.
Correct.
Why did I believe the lie? Why did I take 3 boosters? Why did I believe this? And he said, and so few people can do that. It's confronting themselves, even like with this whole scamdemic and the boosters. And he expressed how difficult that is for people to do. And it was difficult for him, but he did it. So I just want to add that part.
It's the
a lot of it is. I don't disagree with you.
Right. But one still has to come to the determination themselves. And I remember back in the 80s, I shut the TV off with the media when I saw the manipulation during the Clinton and Bush administration. And, it comes a point to where you turn it off. And so
you kick it out.
Yeah. My TV went down into, the storage unit and never came back into my living space. But I just wanted to state that gentleman stated even why he took the boosters. he had to ask the question why, and it was an internal determination. So Ron and you are correct, and it's in different aspects of one's life.
I was
Well-
led recently to a resource. Some of y'all may know about this, but is a gentleman who actually did confront this information and made a very tough life decision, and that is Joseph Bannister. Does anybody
Oh, yeah.
recall that
Mr.
name?
Bannister. I've met him personally, shook his hands.
I listened to his audio testimony, and I've got his book now. It's called Investigating the Federal Income Tax. He was a former IRS special agent, and he heard about this on a radio show, and
He was CID, baby. You know what that is?
Criminal Investigation Division.
Carries a gun.
And he quit his career and everything after looking at all this stuff.
And it's funny. Okay, Ron, let's dwell on that for a second here. Sherry Jackson Peel, there's a couple other of these IRS refugees that are out there and have been for quite some years now. And what's their mantra? Show me the law, right? Show me the law. They had an ad in the New York Times, a full-page ad that they'd pay $50,000 if anybody could show them the law. But where were they missing? What were they missing? They're looking in the statutes.
It's in the agency regulations.
It's in the Code of Federal Regulations. It's right there on the first page. This damn I mean, I don't know of any more of a solid law than an income tax is owed by all individuals. Yada yada yada. That's a law, baby. It's a little law. It's an administrative law, but it's a law. It's right there.
Yeah,
it is.
Right.
None of them ever found it.
I think what's the most difficult is, and they outlined this in the movie The Never Ending Story. Has anybody seen that movie?
Never even heard of it.
Okay, well,
Time
The
ago.
Never Ending Story was, yeah, a long time ago. It's like 80s, 90s, something like that. My kids were young when that movie was out. But what it was there was a nothing that was taking over the land of Fantasia. And Fantasia was the hopes and the dreams and the aspirations of the people. And the more they lost focus on their hopes and dreams, the more of Fantasia would fall away and it would actually disintegrate into nothingness. That's why they called the beast the Nothing. But in order for Atreyu, the guy who was tasked with finding out the source of the nothing and defeating it, in order for him to be able to do that, he had to pass 3 gates. And each one was getting more and more terrifying as he passed each gate. And the final gate that was the most difficult was called the Magic Mirror Gate. And when you looked into the Magic Mirror Gate, it would reflect back to you your true self. Kind people would find out that they were truly cruel. Beautiful people were ugly, and your very, very worst fears of what existed inside you would be reflected back to you, because that was your true self and not what you were expressing to others. And that's what people are afraid of when they find this information and they actually see what's behind the mirror, what reflection they've been looking at through their own lives, through their entire lives. They find out that reflection is completely flawed and they don't know what's on the other side. And that scares them to death. And
No,
that's why this message is so hard.
I don't disagree, Paul. And you touched on in the story of that movie a lot of things here: the mirror and the opposites, and the falling away of Fantasia as people come into reality and their hopes and dreams aren't met, and all that. Well, boy, Fantasia's gone, man. The U.S. is gone today. All right. So very interesting, our challenge here. But the only, Ron, you're in sales, and there's a whole scientific methodology behind marketing. All right. And all you are, as Ron's probably been, you ever studied under Tom Hopkins? He
I
was
have
pretty
not,
good at
no.
that. Oh, he's good. He's very good. He's more of a modern Zig Ziglar type guy, a little more sophisticated. But he goes, well, every time you get a no, you're one step closer to a yes, because it's all a ratio. You're going to ask so many people are going to be interested, and so many aren't. And so when you get a no, you just go, oh, good, I'm one step closer to a yes, and you go talk to the next guy. There are
Absolutely.
people out there that are absolutely desperate for this information right now. But you see, here's our problem: is it's such a big change because it totally inverts everyone's lives that it just like Ron said, it takes a while to process this, man. You got to go into every nook and cranny of your life and see how this information affects it, re-straighten it out, and then go back and find the next one, right? So it's the exceptional person. It goes back to the Old Testament statement, because they have not a love of the truth. The people that are presented with this and turn their backs on it do not have a love of the truth, right or wrong.
Yeah.
And see, I had a craving for it. I'd been looking for it since I was in my teenage years, you know. And man, when I glommed onto this, there was no stopping. I hadn't stopped since. That was 30 years ago. But boy, some people aren't like that.
Yeah, and I'm drowning in books. I mean, I've ordered so many books to read from SEDM, and I got Joseph Bannister's book now, and I mean, just all this these resources. I'm grateful that people have been doing this for 20, 30 years, and resources are available for people that are coming in new to this. And, you know, to start off with that in 1990 or in the 80s, like John and Glenn and others did, that's unbelievable to be a trailblazer back at that point in time.
I hope y'all all appreciated Glenn yesterday and some of these stories. And man, I could tell you a bunch of them, you know, that we hadn't had a chance to cover. But there's no doubt this is a divine project. Okay, and I mean, I had to come to the realization of that a while back, but there's no other way to define it.
No.
I think the important thing that Glenn shared yesterday that I thought was important is that John sought the truth. He didn't care about people paying, not paying, money, getting money back. He wanted to know the truth of the Internal Revenue Service and everything that goes with that. So I think that's the real difference. He didn't have a motive.
Well, that goes back to the Old Testament, because they have not a love of the truth. He had a love of the truth. I have a love of the truth. All of you guys do too. And we'll walk through walls. I mean, listen, when I first got exposed to this, I would have walked through walls to get answers. Okay. I was that hungry. And many of you would too. So we got it now. And now we
having a
realize
fake
how powerful
president and a fake Oval Office certainly helps motivate.
Well, yeah, just sort of the exposure, no doubt, gives us a lot more potential. But so I don't know any other way to do this. I mean, folks, I couldn't get anybody to listen to this for a long time. And it was only through sheer determination and persistence. And finally, Jeff Bennett, Paul, looking for programming, said, look, Roger, I don't understand what you're telling me. I've been trying to explain it to him for years, but I couldn't explain it very well back then, you know? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand it, but I know you do, and I'll put you on the air. And that's where this started. The toehold that Jeff Bennett gave us. And it brought forth people like Kay, who has since brought us Joe. It brought people like John Kasarab, and some others back in those days. But we've got the answer, and either we've got to get better at getting it out and get more people, or else the situation's got to get better where people are more receptive, or a combination of the two, which I think is going to be the answer, a combination of the two.
Hey, Roger?
Yes, Joan, we've been trying to get to you for 5 minutes. We marginalized you. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. What year did you discover that it was the feudal system? And what year did you discover it was that the feudal lord was the Secretary of State?
Okay, well, I'll give you that answer. I knew it was the feudal system from the start because John Benson knew that and they taught that. You can read it in United Slaves of America. It's all through there. And that was written in 1992, in the fall of 1992. I did not. Here's the problem I had. I can come back and analyze it now. I couldn't back then. Is one of their techniques is changing the labels on the concepts. You know, I mean, I knew there was this black thing. I knew about the slaughterhouse cases. I was very interested and schooled in all that. Wong Kim Ark, all of those cases were covered under John and Glenn's tutelage. Okay. And I knew there were these two statuses, but I never could pinpoint it because they keep changing the labels, you know. In Title 8, it says something. Over in Title 42, it's the white citizens. Down here in 26 CFR, it's non-resident alien. Up here, it's called territorial citizen. So they obviously use that as one of their master techniques. And Joan, I can tell you exactly. Yeah, I can remember it as if it was yesterday. It was when I decided to move to Argentina in 2007 and had to get a passport for the first time. And when I went to the post office. I've told this story before. Some of you may not have heard it. I reluctantly, because I was scared of interfacing with these bastards just like everybody else is. Okay. And I went to the post office. Our little, the family home is over in the eastern part of Panama City in a little municipality called Callaway. I went to the little Callaway post office, picked up the purple and the orange. That's the DS11 and the 82. They were color coded, and took them back home. And I sat down at the desk and I put my feet up on the desk and I picked up a DS11 and started reading it. And Joan, at the top of the first page, was the answer I've been looking for 15 years.
Yeah.
Top of the first page. Okay. Secretary of State of the United States of America. That's what it says. And then underneath it, back then, they had the warning box as the first thing on as you read through the instructions. They hide it now. They've buried it. Okay. But there's the warning box. You can attach documentation, including affidavits, and right above it on the top of the page is the Secretary of State of the United States. Now, the reason I was able to put those together is early on when we were all students with John and Glenn, and somebody from Nebraska had written to the Nebraska Secretary of State and asked them for a letter stating that they were a Nebraska state citizen. And whoever the Secretary of State of Nebraska was had written them this beautiful letter, man. It was on Nebraska state stationery with the buffalo and whatever their emblem is at the top, and big gold leaf streamers down each side. And it was a beautiful letter. And it said, so-and-so is a proud citizen of the state of Nebraska. Well, all of us, they started waving it around. You can still find it online. Somebody sent me a copy of it online not too while back. Joshua Wall Builders, who it was, Ron. And so we all wanted one, and I don't know how many people wrote to the Secretary of State of their state, but I did, Florida. And the Secretary of State of Florida wrote me back a letter, and it said, hey, man, sorry, I can't do this. The Secretary of State of the United States has control of all matters concerning citizenship. And I was too green in 1992. The sentence stuck in my mind. It came back when I saw the passport application, but I was too green to figure it out at that point. Okay. So it was that moment in 2007 when I saw that, and I went, holy smokes, I've got them. And I remember my brother was down for the weekend that weekend, and I went through the house. We got a little Florida wing. You walk through from one house to the other part of the house, and my brother was sitting out there, and I'm going, George, I got him. And he goes, sure you do. I'll never forget it. But that was it. And all I knew to do, I took my 5-page affidavit, I included it in the passport application, and I shot it in, like winging a prayer kind of thing. I didn't know for sure, And then that was the summer in 2007 when they changed the requirements to travel to Canada, the Caribbean, and Mexico. You used to could do it on a driver's license. And that was the summer that they mandated passport cards for that activity. And so when I sent mine in, it got caught with all of these people that had to have a passport card at the last minute to go through their summer vacation they already had planned and paid for. So there was a huge rush. I think it took 8 weeks to get back, and I was on pins and needles every day. Okay. And bam, finally, the mail gal who's very close to our family dropped it there in the mailbox one day. And I went, holy smokes. And that's when I started really piecing everything together the way it is. Okay.
Great.
And I couldn't get anybody to listen to me. One guy, my dear friend from Panama City, he's like a son to me. It's another God thing. We had a neighbor that he and I used to walk every morning. He was an older guy from Milwaukee. He'd retired down there, and he was a good guy. And we'd go out and walk every morning at this nice little park that's over by the bay there. And I kept telling Frank, I was explaining this to him, and he hired this other guy to do some work on their house, and that was Jeff. And Jeff was already into that. Him and I immediately bonded, and he's like I said, he's like a son to me now. But I couldn't get anybody to listen, man. Same problem all of us are having today. It's not as acute now as it was back then. And the problem I had back then is I understood it. I just couldn't explain it very well.
Well, you do a bang up job now.
Well, we've got, you know why, Paul? It's because of this show. If you guys want to learn this, if you're new and listening to this, if you really want to learn it, start teaching it to people. Doesn't matter how well you know it. You start teaching it. You're teaching it for you. You're going to find out damn quick what you don't understand. You go back and beef up on that, just like so many of you have done, and you go find somebody else. And the next time you tell it better. And the more you explain it and teach it to people, the more you learn. And it's this show that has allowed us to get this thing evaporated down to you teach people is pretty simple now. Remember Jim Crow? Yeah, they made us all Jim Crow. I mean, how complex is that? Barnes recognizes it. He just doesn't recognize the other side. His 14th Amendment was the great equalizer. That's his words. Yeah, it sure was. It equalized us all into the Jim Crow status.
Yep. Well, what happened to Whitey?
Well, I mean, that's the question, isn't it? I guess he just went away off into the ether.
So it didn't do much equalization for him now, did it?
And again, what this shows you is their lack of power. The only power they've got is this. If they wouldn't have pulled this scam, they'd just be a bunch of damn rich Jews. They wouldn't be in control. To some extent, maybe, because of the money. But it's this little deal of assigning a property right to you upon birth. That's all of their power. Don't forget, slavery is the single most profitable business in the history of the planet.
Yeah.
Roger.
So people
Okay,
just
hold on.
need to realize the fact that no man has authority over them.
Okay, well, see, that's the big truth. They don't want you to think you got power. We've got the power. Who was that trying to say something right there?
That was Sketch. How you doing today? I hope you're well.
Yeah, pretty well.
I have a couple comments. I did watch the video. The condition that we have to deal with, and Ron was talking about trying to teach other people and getting them to maybe look into it. I call the condition walking Pavlov's dog in Stockholm. in Stockholm, walking Pavlov's dog in just a minute, Stockholm syndrome. That's what I call the condition, and it's very frustrating. And I try and teach people, and gosh, you really realize, I have all these pieces of information, but I bounce around too hard. So when you say we all are, gosh, just a minute, we all. Well,
Jim Crow.
Yeah, we are all Jim Crow. Yes, and that's the great starting point, I think, because people can grasp that. And I have some quotes from Barnes, and I want to say the information that we learn here with all the good people. I would have said, yeah, it's all great, but then now that I know this information, it's like, how far off the mark can he be? Because of the information we have here. So I have a couple quotes that he said that really hit the mark for me. It said, Barnes said, this decision ends all such discrimination, no matter where it originates from. And then he said it ends all ancestral discrimination. I'm going, how far off the mark can he be because of the information we know? And it's about the individual over the ancestral. I'm going, wow. That's
well, if it was here's where he's right. If it was ancestral, you'd get your status transferred through blood, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going. So
here's where we got to give them a little leeway. Is they all came out of these traditional law schools, and man, most of these lawyers can't think outside the box, folks. Just like your doctor doesn't want to hear about nutrition, and just like your dentist doesn't want to hear about fluoride and mercury. Same exact thing.
Yep. And then the one last quote that I thought was interesting. He's going, oh, well, all the boxes are going to have to disappear about your race. I'm going, okay, well, what about status and the U.S. citizen box?
Well, he doesn't understand that.
Understood.
I've been toying with going on over there to Viva Barnes Law and trying to put some of these little teasers out, to them, because I've heard Barnes reads everything that's posted there. I've heard him say it. Okay. I haven't done that yet, but I'm toying with it.
And he did mention one thing that I didn't understand why he mentioned it, and he mentioned the Dred Scott case.
Yes. Well, the Dred Scott led up to it was a very important case in the consideration of the 14th Amendment. And it says it right there in the slaughterhouse cases. Okay. And it was because of the incapacity of Dred Scott. Now, how much do you know about Dred Scott, Sketch?
I do not know much at all. That's why I asked the question, so I could get educated.
Okay, well, Dred Scott was a Southern slave who went up to a non-slave state in Illinois, and he was trying to get free. And the Dred Scott decision was on that situation. And now it's important. There's some background here that's important. Is Bruce with us today? Lurking there, Bruce? It's unusual if he's not. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that oversaw that decision and was the Chief Justice for 20 plus years was a South Carolinian named Roger Taney, Taney. Roger Taney never even went to law school. He was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for over 20 years, I believe. Okay. And he was the Chief Justice over Dred Scott. And what they ruled was a man of African descent, whether he was in a free state or not, could not be a citizen of the country. Now, Massachusetts, and I've got proof of this, Massachusetts went the other way. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But the Dred Scott, it was a conclusion that a black man who went from a slave state to a non-slave state could not be free. And the conclusion was that the only way you could help and alleviate the Dred Scott situation was to put an amendment in the Constitution. Now, in that same section of the slaughterhouse cases, we've talked about this several times. It says, there's a wonderful discussion. I wish my eyes were better and I could read some of that stuff to you. But there's a wonderful little section in there that starts with Dred Scott. And it says there was a lot of discussion in D.C. at this time. It was in public circles, in newspapers, and in the public journals. It says that in the slaughterhouse cases. And the discussion was that a person who'd been born and raised in the D.C. or the territories, they didn't have a status. There was only the state citizen status. So they were not a citizen of the nation because they were born and raised in D.C. and there was no status. So that's what the 14th Amendment, at least ostensibly on the surface, was passed for. And that's why I say what they've done is manifested it into an ethnic deal. These guys were planning this stuff 170 years ago, folks. They took this status situation and manifested it into the Jim Crow laws. Black facilities, white facilities. Well, it wasn't a black and white issue. It's a political issue. State citizenship versus federal citizenship. You can't tell me that everybody that was born and raised in D.C. and the territories up to the passage of the 14th Amendment was a black slave. Because they weren't. Now, a one-night sketch I was watching a couple of years ago, I love Antiques Roadshow, okay? I just love that show. And all the stories and the old stuff that comes up and all that stuff. And so I'm watching Antiques Roadshow one night, and Nastasia, it was from Boston. And you've got, what's the huge public broadcasting station up there? WB, I can't figure, I don't remember the call letters. Anyway, the big
WBZ, I think.
No, the BZ is the big flagship station. This is the public.
BGH, I think
it is, maybe BGH, whatever it is. They were up there in Boston with an Antiques Roadshow. Good market for it, right? And this girl comes up, black gal, and she said, I think it is GBH, WGBH, the public broadcasting facility, was having an auction to raise funds from all this stuff they accumulated over the years. And a document came up, and this girl bought it on auction from WGBH, and she brought it to the road show to show. And it was a black Negro slave who'd been naturalized in the state of Massachusetts, and she had the documents. And they made him a citizen of the United States of America. It's right in the document. So this, I believe, preceded Dred Scott. So the Supreme Court, and many people aired, it was a very controversial decision at the time. Still is. Okay. But there's proof right there from Massachusetts that wasn't applied in all the states, and they did take a former Negro slave and made him a state citizen of the United States of America. I've got the document somewhere. I took a screenshot of it. But that's what all that led up to this whole thing. But what's interesting to me that I've come to realize all these years later is they manifested it in an ethnic setting. It wasn't an ethnic question. What happened to the white people in Washington, D.C. when they passed the 14th Amendment? Did they go to the black facility or did they go to the white facility? I don't know the answer to that question. It's hypothetical. But you see, my point is they took a political question and manifested it into a race question to help foment all this hatred and all this separation that they could apply, where they could pit us against each other all these years later. That answer your question in a roundabout way, Sketch?
Oh, you bet. And you brought up a memory. I used to be a runner for the auction in New Orleans. My mom brought me down to the
auctioneer clinic
for the public radio television station down there, and we'd go every year, and I'd be a runner, bringing new products to auction off. And
okay,
thank you for bringing that memory up. I hadn't remembered.
Well, I'm sitting there watching Antique Roadshow, and that comes on. I just about crapped my pants.
Yeah, I think somebody put a link to that video of that.
Well, you know who I turned onto it? I turned Joshua Wallbuilder onto it from SEDM. I'd be shocked if it's not over there somewhere.
Well, it was put on the Gypsy board at one time. I remember watching it. And yes, you helped me out, and I hope you helped other people out, and I yield blessings to you.
Oh, thank you, Sketch. So, somebody else got something they wanted to add?
Roger, what was the name of the video again? Sorry, Princess.
It was an Antique Roadshow, Princess. It was this, and I don't remember which episode. And it's an Antiques Roadshow episode from Boston.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Roger.
Yes, sir. Well, there's Wahib. Wahib, did you have a nice 4th of July?
Yes, I did. I had a very wonderful 4th of July. You were saying last week I had asked you about the United Nations International Health ID certificate crap. You remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you said, what does that have to do with you? How does that apply to you? That's what you said to me.
Right.
Yeah. And
do you not understand how it doesn't? Do you not understand how it doesn't?
Yes, that with respect to the fact that I'm not a United States citizen and my paperwork is on file with the DOD, the Secretary of Department of.
I hope it's the Secretary of State, Wahib, or else you hadn't been listening very
close. That's what I'm trying to think of, Secretary of State. And
have you got a passport? Wahib,
I didn't do I got to get the passport. Yeah, I do. I'm still working on that.
What's your obstacle?
I got to hurry up and get it. That's the bottom line. I know that there's the first part. I still haven't done the Attorney General yet.
Well, Wahib, shame on you, Wahib. Shame on you.
I gotta go back. I gotta go overlook what Merkel sent me. Oh God. Not Merkel.
Raya.
I'm Merkel.
Hold on.
I'll call you. We'll call. Thank you.
Is that Angela Merkel?
Okay. No. Wahib. So you're gonna pussyfoot through this process, are you? Wahib.
No. I'm not trying to I'm slow poking. Yeah, I know it's been like 6 months to a year now. Hell, it took me 6 months to send the doggone thing to the Secretary of the.
Well, I mean, that's okay. There's no time limit on here, but I'm just saying, if you're interested in this, it seems like you'd proceed a bit more judiciously.
I understand. Yes, and I tell myself that every morning.
I mean, you
I
don't have
say
an
the
extra.
same thing.
You don't have an extra $30.
No, it's not that. Oh God, I don't know why I'm so. And then I hear people on your program. They've only been 1 month, and they've got all this shit done and sent off a long time ago. Believe me, I hear what's going on. I know these guys been less time than I have, and they've done all this. It's already a done deal. They've already got a passport and the attorney general and all that. I know. Trust me. That's why I put myself through the exercise of.
Well, Wahib, the only thing I can tell you is it's your freedom. Okay. So you can procrastinate as long as you want, but you ought to be able to get, if you want to be able to stand up, you need that passport card. Okay. So $30, do it. Now, back to your question. When they pass this WHO thing, which they will, they take it to the countries and they mandate it regulatorily. They're going to use the agencies to enforce, and you don't have any jurisdiction over you. Those agencies don't after you do this. So that's why I'm not scared of it, and you shouldn't be either.
You mean after I do the attorney general and after I do the passport?
Well, no, technically, you've got it into the main guy. You could stand on that, but you got nothing to back it up except how well you can defend your position. How well can you defend your position, Wahib? If they come
about as good as I can to fighting Bruce Lee. About as good as I could fighting Bruce Lee.
Then I guess you need to get your act together, don't you?
You have to do it within this week, Wahid, if you really want to get it done.
So, Wahid, all of these things that are man-made laws are enforced regulatorily through the agencies. That's the deep state. I heard one of these guys, he was the IRS whistleblower the other day, being interviewed, and he says, let's get this deep state stuff out of there. It's the administrative state. He came right out and said it. I'm sorry if y'all hear grinding. We've got some sort of a project going on. So, Wahib, that's your answer. Regulatory agencies can only enforce those kind of things on people they have jurisdiction over. Your job is to learn this information and get to the point where you can stand up there at the guy coming at you with a needle and go, you can't do that to me, big boy. I mean, that's pretty much it. Now, so there's a couple other people trying to say something there a second ago. Who was it?
Ryan, I want to.
There he is, Boris. Hey, Boris.
How are you, Ryan? Buenas tardes. I want to ask you, this is a fraud, yeah? How do you know that you cannot backtrack when you do your affidavit? How do you know that this don't work back? Did somebody try it already?
Oh, what, in this vaccination thing?
No, like, like you are a U.S. citizen because that's what they teach you, but you're really not. Because they hiding it.
You are. Yeah, you really are, but you're also the other one at the same time, which defies any kind of explanation.
But you don't know it.
Somebody with given rights can be equal to somebody with man-given civil rights. I mean, there's a big fraud right there. Okay,
but and then that's right, they don't tell you nothing because they committed a fraud.
Yes.
How do you know that you cannot backtrack it? Because you've been deceived all your life. They tell you you are a U.S. citizen when you are really not a U.S. citizen. Only.
Well,
I have something to share on that.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yesterday I was replying to something on Telegram, and I saw on Dawn's group, because someone showed me something, a definition, and there was something posted there where they contacted the FOIA and they said there's nothing on that to explain that you are a U.S. citizen. And the question that was brought up, how do you know if you are a U.S. citizen? And I put it on there. I said, all U.S. citizens are U.S. nationals. And the only reason they say that they can't find anything on you that you're a U.S. citizen is because you're a national. And the U.S. citizen is a presumption.
True.
It's a fiction. So they can't tell you that you are, because you're a national. This is why they're sending people. There's people sending back, getting responses saying that there's nothing on that about U.S. citizens, but it's because we are nationals.
Why here, when you're dealing with FOIA, you've got to be very specific in your requests.
Right. They were specific.
What's showing I'm a U.S. citizen? You say, is there anything in my folder reflecting citizenship evidence?
Right. But so, I don't know, maybe people asked if they were U.S. citizens and they got like a response with no U.S. citizens. There's nothing saying that you're a U.S. citizen.
That's right, because you've agreed with it the whole time. What do you think we're going to put the fraud of the damn birth assignment of thing in your damn folder?
Yeah,
no, we did
it.
It's under presumption. Every time we ever asked you, you said yes and agreed with us.
Right. That's what I said. I'm like, everybody always said yes, a verbal consent to the U.S. citizen and resident.
Well, it wasn't verbal. These are written. You got to sign something after you check those boxes.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. And then I gave them the definitions again for national, because they posted another definition for national, but there was no link, and it really had nothing to do with the national in this country. And like, these are the only two that you should be using. It's the 101, 21A, and the Statute 66 definition is the original definition.
How are you making any progress on this potential meet and greet down there in Southern California, Mirka?
There's I'm contacting like a few people, and they're just really busy.
Well, what you need to find is a venue. First thing you need to find is a venue.
I found a place.
You found a venue.
I found a place. Yeah, I found a place. Monica, someone that told me about it. So I was just gonna contact them and see if they want to do something outdoorsy, or do they want to go into a place and sit down, because everybody over here is always out and about hiking or doing something in nature. So
well, it'd be nice if you could do like a potluck get together somewhere in the park. Most of the weather,
I have some places in mind. I'm just trying to find a good time for everybody, though. It's like everybody's all over the place.
Well, the best thing we ever found was to go to a restaurant that's got some sort of a sizable dining room, and go, we'd like to have this whole dining room, and everybody that comes will buy a meal, and they'll say, of course. And now you got a room that's sheltered, and you can have your meeting there. So that's another idea.
I found one of those already.
Okay, good deal. There was a female trying to say something there. Oh, now come on. We stopped the conversation to entertain you.
Oh, sorry, I had muted myself again. I was just saying, Mirka, if I could be included on that list. I'm in California as
well. Who's talking?
Princess.
Oh, hey, Princess. Okay, yeah.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Princess, how are you doing, sweetie?
Doing okay, no complaints. I'm doing better than I deserve, so I'm okay. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, I'll send you a message, Princess.
Well, Roger, can I ask you a question, since we were talking about the whole FOIA request? Someone else, they're doing something else. They said they went through the USCIS and requested a FOIA
I think that's the National Police Database, isn't it?
No, immigration and something. United States Citizenship Immigration Services, I believe.
Okay.
USC. And they did like a FOIA, and they got something saying there was no, from the centric database, kind of, I guess, like what Merkel was saying. It doesn't say, yes or no, but I think that's the same thing then, right? Any of these places where you do the FOIA request.
Well, I guess so. Do we know that the Secretary of State who received the affidavit has transferred a status change to USCIS?
Oh, I don't know. This was just someone that was sharing with me.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. They're putting a FOIA into some agency. They need to put it into the Secretary of State, not USCIS.
Okay, well, I'll have to let them know that.
That's who they submitted their affidavit to, I hope.
I don't even know if they're, I don't know that they're on this path. They were just sharing with me because I was sharing.
You get into one of those situations. Yeah, we don't know because we don't know what they know. We don't know what they've been taught. We don't know what misconceptions they're under.
Right.
Yeah, it was just a whole. It seemed to say the same thing as the one from the Department of.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Secretary of State would be first. And I'm just reading a blurb here. USCIS also administers the E-Verify program that was set up to allow employers to verify the citizenship status of job applicants. This program has been controversial because its giant database has been plagued with inaccuracies.
Yeah. So
Roger, the other thing I was going to ask with regard to that I know the USCIS was that, remember the I-9 that we were talking about before?
Sure.
I'm getting ready to renew, I guess you can call it recontract, whatever, with my employer. I thought this would be a good time to kind of maybe update that because, like you said, most of us put U.S. citizen, and that was not the answer. There were 4 options, and the one that I believe I heard you say was the most correct for us was the alien
permitted to work.
Yeah, permitted to work. But my question was, because I want to understand why I'm putting that down as far as the options, because then they ask you for, either a USCIS number, a foreign passport number, or an immigration number.
Attach a copy of your affidavit to the I-9 and submit it.
Okay, because I got to do that, I guess, within the next few days.
They used to have U.S. national on the I-9. They've hidden it.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But I just want to be clear, so that non-citizen is the one, non-citizen national one.
I'm telling you, I'm going to preach it to you. They're scared to death of this.
Yeah.
Do you see their actions?
Say that again? What did you say?
Do you see the actions they're taking to hide it? Additionally, they're scared to death of this.
Yeah. So I have an appointment with the payroll because I'm trying to get my W-8 bin in and the W-4, and they've never seen it, and I'm just trying to kind of educate them a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, well, that's part of our job, unfortunately. Be sure they've got a copy of your affidavit.
Yeah, they should. I've sent it twice, and I'll take one and I'll attach one to the I-9 as well. So, I mean, my goodness.
Okay, fantastic.
All right. Thank you. How are you?
You're welcome,
Roger?
sweet. Yes.
I just wanted to state anyone who's doing a FOIA, wants to do a FOIA, I get newsletters from, it's Muck, M-U-C-K, Rock, R-O-C-K, all one word, their website, and their specialty. They do FOIA requests for others, and then they do their own FOIA requests, and also they have a FOIA 101.
They got a little
free program how to do a FOIA, but that's their whole deal is FOIA. So it's a good resource.
Judicial Watch too. Judicial Watch does everything they do on FOIAs.
Right, but here they help you to how to do it.
Right.
If anyone has any questions.
It really is very simple, but what you've got to be is specific in your request. They won't take general. We have no unresponsive. You get back an unresponsive message. You've got to be specific.
So I just wanted to put that out there for people.
Any and here's an example. Any and all submissions dealing with citizenship evidence. A. B. Passport. Any citizenship evidence dealing with passport applications. Those are specific questions, pointed. You can't just go in and say, am I a U.S. citizen or national? I ain't going to tell you.
Yep, citizenship evidence. I just want to add a couple little points here.
And by the way, Merv, before you launch off, that is their internal terminology, citizenship evidence.
Yep.
That's why it's in the title of the affidavit. It's their terminology. It ain't no, oh, I'm an American national affidavit state citizen standing on my head in the corner. Drop all that crap.
Well, similarly, I dropped all that crap and just used their one sentence, except add God, affirmed by God, instead of their swearing. But yeah, make it simple. There's less to try to rebut. The GBH thing was Western Great Blue Hill, interestingly enough. The Freaky Logos, this was under freakyloco.fandom.com. They dropped W. But the archive of that roadshow, Antiques Roadshow, I was looking for it and I thought, wait a minute, I sent that to you in the email. So when I looked up in the email, here it is. Monique had found it back in March and she has it posted again. So it's all in all the chats.
Oh, great. Well, you can post that up and you guys can go look at the little segment. And I mean, I was just shocked. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's right there. She's got the paperwork. She bought it at an auction. So it's all there. You just got to get people out of their Pavlovian conditioning and point them in the right direction if they're looking for truth. As frustrating as it is, that's the only path of success we got right now. So we're getting towards the end of the show. Anybody latently had something to ask, you've been hesitant to, or make a comment, now's your time.
Roger, this is Ron one more time. I wanted to just mention the a resource I've come across as well has been the Freedom Law School. And
that's
he's got a little bit different process, but he's got lots of hours of video that is incredibly insightful on the IRS and the tax system and everything else.
Yeah.
freedomlawschool.org.
Yeah. He's a foreigner. Who's the guy that runs that?
He comes from Iran. I forget his name off the top of my head.
Yeah, I knew he was immigrant. He's probably naturalized, I'm sure. But yeah,
I'd love to hook you up with him because he doesn't understand the feudalism aspect of things, but somehow he's kept people out of the income tax thing for 25 years.
Right.
With apparently just sending a letter to your congressmen and senators.
Paymon, Peymon.
Right.
That's right.
That's just. Ron, have you acquired The Law yet by Frederick Bastiat in your scrounging for books?
I have not. The Law by who?
Frederick Bastiat. B-A is French. B-A-S-T-I-A-T, I believe. Have you heard about that book?
No, I have not.
Okay, it was written in the 1800s after the French Revolution. Bastiat was an economist. He wasn't a lawyer, but he lays out, it's a very short book. It's not long to read. It's not complex, but he nailed it back then. Okay. It's something I'd advise you to read.
I will get my hands on it.
Repeat that? Can you have him repeat that website again?
The Freedom Law School?
Yes, thank you. That.
It's simply Freedom Law School, all spelled out.org.
Yeah. He's been around as long as I've been in this, really.
All this stuff is in the rogersales.chatango.com.
The Law is a classic.
I mean, that guy had it nailed. You know what he calls it? Plunder. When these people get in control, they will come out with a moral code and a legal code to justify it. have they not?
Kings and the nobles of the land have done it.
It's an excellent book, Ron. Put that one in your want list right there.
Thank you. I will search that one out. And another one I had to look up at the Internet Archive was USA versus U.S., the loss of legal memory of the American state.
That guy, what's his name? Do you remember what it starts with a B? Was it
Richard Dwight Kegley?
Oh, that's a different one, Kegley. There was another one, USA versus US. It was from a guy in Pennsylvania. And the reason I know about it is my deceased dear friend, Ron Brown, went all the way up to Pennsylvania and spent a week with him. Probst, Lee Probst was his name. That's still out there. And it's
Roger, could you repeat that book that you suggested to him that was a French name? Could you repeat that book?
So, The Law, Frederick Bastiat, Bastiat, I believe.
It's in Roger Sales, Gotcha Tango, the archive version, 80 pages.
Yeah, it's all over the internet. I mean, you get a free download. What is it? 80 pages, Mer?
Yeah.
It's very short, very easy to read. Boy, he had it firm all the way back then.
Spell the last name, Roger. Can you spell that last name, Bastiat?
Wahid.
Bastiat. Is that right, Mer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Bastiat. The Law. So anyway, Ron, you'll like that book. Anybody who wants to go read it, that'll give you a lot of background, especially since it was written in the 1800s. Okay.
Yeah.
Early
Hey, Roger,
1800s.
I was looking on Amazon for it, and I found one that's The Law, the State, and Other Political Writings, and it says it's a collection of 19 of Bastiat's pamphlets or articles.
That's probably a good purchase right there. Daryl will probably be all over that. Yeah, he was an economist. He wasn't a lawyer. But excellent resource. So about to hear the Whistler in a minute. If you got something to say, you better say it quick.
Roger.
Yes, sir.
Glenn was talking about that frog in the morning yesterday.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear the one from Church? Did you ever hear the one from Churchill where he said, "I feel sorry for people that don't drink because when they wake up in the morning, that's the best they're ever going to feel all day."
Right. I like Churchill's quote. It applies to us right here. Once in every man's life, he stumbles across the truth. Most men pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and go on about their way. Isn't that true? Especially in our context here. So, Whistler's probably going to pop up here. Somebody got something to say there? Somebody opened the mic.
That was me. I just want to yatch about Churchill. He sit there and poop his pants.
Well, some of the stuff he was real right. I particularly like the one about Lady. Who was his big? Lady Astor. One of those was his big nemesis. You remember that story, Mer?
Maybe. Go ahead, tell us.
Well, he drank, got a gallon a day. She goes, "Mr. Churchill, you are drunk." And he said, "Yes, Lady Astor, and you are ugly. And when I wake up tomorrow, I'll be sober."
Yeah, but he was uglier, okay?
Yeah, could be. I'm just relating the quote, okay? So there is our Whistler, and that signifies another successful 2-hour get-together to discuss your freedoms. And the good news is we'll be back tomorrow and do it the same darn thing. See what happens as the week gets up to speed the way it should have been on Monday here today, and we'll start seeing news flowing and stuff happening. And just spread the word, folks. You got very simple techniques. Approach people, see if they're interested. If they're interested, feed them. If they're not, pray for them. That's all I know to do. So, Paul, you got anything in parting here before we click out?
Now just check out exposedtomatrix.com. You get all the information on topics we discuss and how to connect to the program and where to find us.
And all the links for the chats. Yeah.
And we'd love to have you and help you see how to get free if you want to.
And Anon posted another version of the law by Frederick Bastiat, and it has 107 pages. So
okay, a little different.
Another one.
It's some real solid information in there. Laying our bodies down. See you tomorrow. We're off.
All right. Great show. That was fun. That was just as good as yesterday. And better than the day before yesterday. We did good day before yesterday, but this was a good show today.
I'm sure y'all did great. Okay. Anybody else got anything for me, or you want to sit around and hear them pounding on something out there?
Hey, Roger.
Is that Dave? That's Dave.
Yes, sir. Is Mike still on? What was that lower court decision he said was yesterday about the First Amendment?
Mike, you still on with us? I thought it was on firearms. That's usually his deal. I think
No,
it was
not. It was about freedom of speech and that these platforms cannot censor us.
Yes, that's right. That's Go ahead, Dave.
Michigan just passed a law that says if you say anything that causes mental anguish to anybody, it is a jailable felony.
A $5,000 fine and 10 years in jail. Did somebody say they dropped that to a misdemeanor, or is that another travesty somewhere? Anyway, yeah, I know that's going on up there, David. Did Whitmer, Wicked Witch of the North, sign it yet? I know she's going to.
I believe she signed it.
Now, did it go through the Senate? You guys have two houses up there, so like a House and a Senate. You have a state Senate, don't you?
We do.
Well, it had to go through the Senate, too. I think it was initially only passed by the House. It's probably still got to go through the Senate.
They could use that against her because of all the anguish she caused.
Boy, and that's
right.
Yeah,
That's what I was
so.
going to say. Turn that and use it back against them.
Yeah.
Her and that vegetarian attorney general up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And her Secretary of State. That's the 3 inches of Eastbrook.
Well, it's a Mel of a Hess. Okay. All right. People instant messaging me. Okay. Anybody else got anything for me this morning? I'm going to take that as a no.
Have a wonderful rest of your day, Roger. We
Good to
love
talk to you, Roger.
You know what I didn't get to talk about was our chili cook-off on Saturday. Our big Canadian American 4th of July. We had it on Saturday because it's the Canadian Day and it's Saturday. And we had a big Jack and them put it together, big chili cook-off. There was like 10 contestants. There was a $500 first prize, and we had 150 people show up. Okay. And they weren't all gringos, but the majority. And it was a nice day. It was a really nice day. Which
one was your favorite?
The guy from Texas. He's the one that wins all the chili cook-offs. Now, interestingly enough, our Canadian buddy came in second place.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. But it's hard to beat. Somebody from Texas knows how to make chili. They put chili sauce in it. You know, the others, it's a meat soup. Right. But a lot of good people, beautiful little setting at a hotel by the airport, big grounds and beautifully sculptured, and just a lovely day. So anyway, that was fun.
Well, I took first place at a chili cook-off many years ago, but I think that I think that people voted for me just because I was the state coordinator of the group, and they were afraid they'd piss me off. So,
well, one of the upper hands that the Texas guy had is his wife was right there, and she was giving you margaritas.
Oh, yeah, right. If you can't dazzle them with brilliance,
you bribe them. You get them drunk.
Bribe them with hooch.
But it was good time, a nice conversation with some folks. So anyway, I'm out of here unless anybody else has got something for me. Thank you, Ron, for joining us.
Yeah.
Coming in a record.
All right. I'll see y'all tomorrow. We'll see what comes up. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
All right. See you tomorrow, Raj. All right. That's about it. We can probably take Global Voice Network offline too. Thank you for joining us for the Radio Ranch with Roger Sales on radio.globalvoiceradio.net and eurofolkradio.com. We're also on homenetwork.tv and freedomnation.tv. For more information on the topics discussed, please go to exposethematrix.com. That's exposethematrix.com. Catch Roger right here Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also catch him on Patriot Soapbox Sundays from noon to 2 with Thumper. Catch that Rumble channel, PSB News on Rumble. I'm Paul from Global Voice Network, thanking everybody for joining us. We'll catch you right back here next time. Have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
Blasting the voice of freedom worldwide, you're listening to the Global Voice Radio Network.
Bye-bye, boys! Have fun storming the castle!
And we're out.
Radio Ranch blessings to you, Paul, Andy, Lisa, and everyone here.
Yeah, thanks to Andy and Lisa. They're my moderating enforcement team in the in the conference room. I appreciate you guys so much. Mirka, she's keeping a watchful eye over PPN Studio. Myrrh throwing in great links and comments. Nastasha, she's always a joy. Everybody.
Monique.
Hey,
Paul.
Monique. Yes.
I'm going to be a turd in your punch bowl.
You could
be a turd in your punch bowl. I'm going to be a turd in your punch bowl.
You're taking us down that blue line of topic again, Brent.
No, you're not.
Yeah, I am. Can someone give Roger the memo? Just because I'm black or just because other people are black don't mean that they subscribe to Calypso Louie. Yeah, when I was growing up and the black Muslims were out selling bean pies in their suits in blazing sun on a Sunday and trying to force their news rag down your throat also, my family didn't cotton up much to them. We were taught disdain towards them.
Calypso Louie? Who's Calypso Louie?
Louis Farrakhan.
Oh, Louis Farrakhan. Okay.
Yeah, and I've got a newfound kind of respect for him. But thing is we kept long arms distance from those people.
Brent, you've known Roger about longer than anybody here. You know that. He's got his faults, but we still love him.
No, but I said, give him the memo that not all black people subscribe to this monolithic thing of, oh, I'm black, we all subscribe. No, we're individualistic like everybody else.
That's why.
You know, I'd rather you give him that memo. You've known him for 30 damn years. I'd rather you give him that memo. Why are you picking on me? Why are you making me the bearer of bad tidings?
Because y'all white.
Just give him a big bear hug and tell him.
And you're holding the punch bowl, Paul.
I'm not holding the punch bowl.
Andy, how
I'm not
come
even
you kept
holding.
on muting during the show? I was going to say something, and it's like, no, I'm not. He's probably got something to say. I'm just going to leave it go unless he makes noise.
Well, Mer's a good bearer of bad news. We'll throw it on her.
Hey, Brent.
Yes.
Brent, this is Bob. On Monday, when they were talking about that skin condition, excuse me, they were talking about the skin condition, and man, it was just terrible. His skin was dark. I was just waiting. I was just anticipating you coming on and saying, "Hey, what's wrong with dark skin?" You missed your chance. Right?
Well, I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, that's it for it. I just, every time John or Roger would say something about the dark blotches, well, it wasn't Roger, he wasn't there. But anyway, yeah, just every time he said that, I was just laughing. I'm saying, I was waiting for your baritone to come in and
Dark chocolate's the best.
Okay, I stepped on Joe from Oklahoma. Joe, unmute and let us know what you said.
I just said
Come
that's
on.
why I love old Brent Bachman. He's a red-blooded. I don't care what color his skin is. He's red-blooded, and I think just almost identical to him. And you know, I reflect back on, with all of his faults and everything else, I reflect back on Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech about where our children will be judged by their character and not by the color of their skin.
He delivered it well, but it was probably written by Stanley David, Levi's son, his handler.
But you don't get my point.
I get your point. I get your point.
It's how things ought to be, and they're trying to take that all back now.
Now, what got me? Oh, go ahead.
My mother used to read a lot of black literature, I guess, in the 50s and 60s and stuff. And one of the books she had, and it was pretty torn up, was called The Nigga Bible. And one of the things in there, it started off with, "A nigga is a nigga by any name." And then it had all these different words conjugated out of Negro and what have you, describing them. It was kind of like a dictionary or a little lexicon and stuff. And that always stuck in my head. I'd like to find that book, but I don't think we have it anymore.
You know, to me, Brent, that word does not have a racial connotation. It has a station in life connotation, and what your character is and who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And
not about your
versions
color.
of the word, just like Nazi. Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I cannot see.
Right. It keeps saying, you know, we'll be Jew blind forever. We keep saying not see, refuse to see, right? But what got me, Brent, was one day when Roger, out of the blue, he was talking about, I think the guy that ran away after I talked about urine. But it's like, it was a black guy that had, you know, had the passport card or had everybody else, right? And it was from James, North Carolina or whatever. So I think that's who it was about. And Roger turns to you and says, "Well, have you been in contact with him?" And you let him have it. You said, "Listen, just because we're black doesn't mean we're all in connection, you know," or some such. It's funny. It's funny. So I get your point, you know, and a lot of people do kind of like that. Roger has kind of backed off from it, but He didn't wait a second to, to ask you if you knew him. That was funny.
Mm-hmm. And I really don't keep track of him, Louis Farrakhan.
Somebody sure should. The Jews have been sending him poisoned, he likes to eat seeds and stuff. And I guess they irradiated him. Yeah, they poisoned him.
Oh.
Wasn't Obama a follower of that guy?
Obama. Follows his
I
own.
don't know what he follows.
Follows his own. He's so arrogant and narcissistic and raised to be that way. That's what he follows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it was after Farrakhan came out with, I'm not anti-Semite, I'm anti-termite.
Lisa, Obama was following the guy who said the chickens are coming home to roost.
And one of the queer boyfriends there got killed in that church.
Hey, Paul, you're a coatings expert on pans. How do you get a sticky burn out of a coated pan?
Soak it with warm water.
I've
Soak
been
it with
soaking
warm
it all
water.
night in hot water.
Storekeeper's friend.
What was it?
We had baked some hamburgers last night. And I guess
Okay,
the
how hot
juices,
did?
400.
Okay, coated pans, particularly Teflons. It's probably not a Teflon pan. They haven't done that in a long time. You cannot heat those above 350. They start breaking down. Anything that, if the pan got hot enough for an oil to actually start breaking down the coating, you have to use about a tablespoon of dish soap in it and just enough water to cover the sticky and let it soak, because you got to break down that sticky oil on it.
Okay.
And if that doesn't do it, you got to throw the pan away. If that doesn't get rid of it, you got to throw the pan away.
Suggestion.
Uh-huh.
Throw the pan away now and go buy you an American cast iron skillet.
Amen.
And all you have to do, if it gets something stuck in there, you cook it until it comes off.
That's right.
And you can do an oil treatment on them.
And keep the dish soap off of it. If you want to use a stainless steel scouring pad, go ahead and do that. But use that in hot water only, and heat from your cooktop.
There's two other options.
There's two other options. What we used to use in the Space Needle, if it's really nasty and you gotta have the pan and it's steel, oven cleaner. Just spray some Easy Up on, follow instructions. If it's not that, if it's not raw steel, put warm water in there, almost hot but warm, and directly on all the nasty stuff, pour salt on it. Let it sit for days. That salt is a carcinogenic. It will eat and eat. That's what caustic soda comes from. That's what Clorox and Comet comes from, is the salt in the sea. And that's why those rocks are so nasty on the shoreline, is because the salt eats at them for decades. I'm done.
Thank you.
Is that an aluminized steel pan, an aluminum pan, or a steel pan that's coated?
It seems to have some weight to it, but it's possibly aluminum or some alloy, and it's got a coating. It's from that Good Cook company.
Is it stamped? Well, is it stamped or turned? Is the pan about a 1/4 inch thick, or a little thinner than that?
It's thinner than a 1/4 inch. It's probably
What
about
about
an eighth.
about an 1/8 of an inch?
Something like
Okay,
that.
it's probably pressed aluminum. They'd have a hard time pressing a steel that thick. So be very gentle with it, getting the stuff off of that coating. You can take the coating off completely, but then you'll have a bare aluminum pan. You don't want that. And if it's a steel pan, you don't want to take the coating off, because then it'll start to rust and you'll have to start treating it like a cast iron pan. It'll be every bit as much of a pain in the ass as a cast iron pan, with none of the cast iron benefits, the even heating, the high temperature, the oven safe. It won't have any of that. What?
I beg to differ with you. Cast iron will not rust. If you wash it and put it back on the fire and cook it dry, you won't have it. And you don't wait a week to use it. If you use it a week or a month at a time, you're going to rust. But if you use it regularly, you'll never have a rust build up.
Right. And you won't even need hot water. But listen, even if it rusts, cast iron, good cast iron, you can coat it. You know, you rub off with steel wool, whatever, the loose rust, and you coat it with oil and you slow bake it like at about 200 degrees for however long. And you will have your pan renewed.
Right.
And if you buy a steel pan, remember, steel is not iron.
Right. That's the point I was trying to make.
Other metals.
That's the point I was trying. That was the point I was trying to make. A cast iron pan will rust and you can recover from it, but when a steel pan rusts, and it will rust as quickly as a cast iron will if you don't treat it right, but it's harder to recover from a rusted steel pan. It's just junk. You throw it away. So I have cast iron pans. I have some coated ones and I have some uncoated ones, and I prefer the uncoated ones because they're seasoned. I don't use soap on them. When they're hot, I take them off the stove. I put some water in them. I swish around them with a stainless steel scrubby. I rinse them out. I put them back on the stove. And
I never use water. Nope, never use water or soap on them. You just clean it out, and then put a little oil in there and heat it. I mean,
on that iron cast steel, Steve, right? Don't like to do that.
Of course, I don't eat meat and stuff, so it's no problem.
But
this this site you were saying has Pro Ease nonstick.
I hear peanut oil is the best to cure a pan. Is that right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, any natural oil. I mean, even olive oil, but
bacon fat.
Peanut oil.
Suet.
Well, peanut oil can take a little higher temperature, but like I said, if you're recovering it, you just want to really cover it really good with oil and put it in your oven, slow bake.
Bacon fat works good.
That's mine. Lard, bacon fat.
Suet is the best.
The reason I put water in it is there are food particles that'll be on the pan that water will soften up so they come out very easily, and the water will not break down the seasoning on the pan. The oil actually creates a barrier between the water and the pan. So when you use water in it, no soap, you scrub it out lightly. The water loosens the food particles. It leaves a skin of oil. You rinse it one more time. You put it on the stove. You turn on the burner on low, and you forget the pan exists for about 5 minutes. Then you just put it back in the cupboard where it belongs, or put it back in the oven where a lot of people store them. That's why I use water, is it breaks down the food particles that actually get crusty and stick to the surface of the oil.
Walmart makes this really, really nice. It's got a piece of rubber
and it's surrounded by like a chain mail, and it's a iron skillet cleaner. All you got to use is water and that, and it's perfect.
Yeah, well, I have a little different diet than people too, and the only drawback with cast iron is some people need to limit their iron, and you will actually obtain iron from it.
Fast food.
There is definitely a difference in what you cook, because when we go down to Maxine's, she's cooked with her cast iron skillets down there for many, many years, and the food has a whole different flavor coming off of her skillets than coming up here and cooking off of these.
Well, are you guys at your place more than hers? Sounds like you might need to do some pan swapping.
Nope, I like the ones up here better.
Oh, you don't like that natural seasoning from her pans?
Well, she likes different things than I do. But I can, and it really shows up when you fry eggs. It really shows up in the taste of the eggs.
How so?
The eggs from her skillets are more heightened, and I don't know what the flavor is, but there's a seasoning comes out of those cast iron skillets that doesn't come out of the ones from up here. But they never get soaked. The skillets never get soaked. They're generally wiped out, rinsed out with water, and thrown back on the cook stove and heated up to where they dry out quick and everything's good. Shoot, there's almost as many opinions on this cast iron skillets as there is on any of the subjects we talk about.
Right? We're an opinionated bunch. Joe, do you have those little silicone pot holder things for your cast iron skillets?
No, ma'am. Have cotton, if their handle's too hot, we have cotton pot holders that you grab a hold of them with.
Don't do what I did today.
That way,
Go ahead, Joe.
That way, if the handle gets turned over the fire on another burner, it's not going to burn anything.
I was going to say, don't do what I did. I rinsed my pan out. I set it on the burner. I turned the burner on, not thinking. Sat down and ate my last piece of string cheese and didn't realize I turned the burner on high until it started smoking. So there went my seasoning.
Well, you can start over.
Yeah, that's what I had to do. I still cooked my eggs in it.
It'll be okay, Rich. There wasn't any crime.
Right. Yeah, I just wasn't thinking. I was hungrier than I was paying attention. And then it's funny.
Lisa, when it comes.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say it's funny you guys are talking about cast iron pans after I did that to mine.
Lisa, how many times did my mute come off? About 4?
Yep, probably of something like that.
Okay, so it must have been every time I started my truck.
Ah, yeah. People
Okay,
have discovered that lately.
Looking for lunch.
You didn't get your breakfast burritos?
Taco truck didn't show up, and then I saw a place last week where they had an outdoor. It was a trailer with a stone-fired. I figured, well, not tacos. I'll go get a pizza, right? So I go over there. He's not there. Oh, the bitch. Oh, screw it. I'll go to the barbecue truck, right? So that's an extra 5 miles away. So I go, all the truck is. It's not there.
Is everybody, what is everybody hungover from yesterday or what?
Don't know. So I ended up getting a Jets pizza.
Not a drinker.
So did you ever find food?
Yeah, I went and got a Jets pizza. It's not the greatest pizza, but it was something to eat.
I didn't find food yesterday. I had peanut butter and string cheese.
I heated up leftovers yesterday, but it was really good. Sausage gravy and biscuits and fried apples.
Yum.
Since no one's talking, may I bring up an unpleasantry?
Sure.
An unpleasant tree? What kind of tree is unpleasant?
An one.
Is that like an onion?
I think it was yesterday or day before, maybe, I don't know. But then, when the last couple of days, there was discussion about recovering water from the eaves of your house and who the water belongs to, be it the state or whatever. This is from the Tri-State Livestock News, 24th of June of 2023, and the front page article is digging for the truth. Some landowners say no to Summit Carbon Solutions easements. Eminent domain may be enforced. And I'm sure all of you have heard of this carbon capture deal, to where they are taking carbon dioxide and pumping it into underground storage and yada yada, because of all the climate change and all that kind of happy horse crap.
Yeah, they call them carbon farms.
Okay, well, this kind of goes back to the discussion regarding private property. And Summit Carbon they were going to do drill holes 90 feet deep into the soil to determine the soil profile, whatever. And they got these easements from a court, and the landowners didn't want them on their places, but they drove across their places, these farmers' places. This is in South Dakota, willy-nilly, across their hay fields and crops and everything else. And the judge said, you have to stay 100 feet away from them or we're going to put you in jail. And this is kind of shit that's going on, folks. This is a bad deal.
Yeah, that judge needs to see if he's got an oath of office and all that other good stuff, because that's a criminal offense. You don't go driving across somebody's fields.
Sounds like he's a prime candidate for my guillotines.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but yeah. Or rope. I want him to think
Well,
about what he did first.
I don't know when it's going to break, but it's got to break.
He needs to hang on a willow tree.
Exactly, Brent. We only got to do it to a few of them before the rest realize, hey, we don't want that fate.
But this kind of shit just goes on daily.
You go back to England and way back when the judicial system got so corrupt, and you bring in those Hessians and you skin those bad judges alive and make the bench out of their skin for the future judges to sit on. Yeah.
Sounds like a winner to me.
I like that idea.
Of course, the Oi boys will go and say that's akin to a Jewish or a Jew skin lampshade.
We don't care what they say.
Through that.
I think there's more truth to my story than theirs.
I agree. They make up stories.
A Jew skin fart cushion.
I'll be back after this.
Hurry back.
There was no Holocaust.
No, there wasn't. I think the United States government caused more deaths by cutting off supply lines for the Germans than anything.
Yes, there was Holocaust. It's us.
I've worked with a guy that had been on the bombers. He was a Jewish guy. I don't know if he was a bombardier or navigator or whatever. And I asked him, hey, during World War II, why didn't you guys go and target the concentration camps? And he said, oh, those were tertiary targets.
What does that mean, Brent?
It was third in line on their priorities. If they couldn't get the primary or secondary targets, they would go for them.
That's unreal.
So you know the primary and secondary?
Probably your munitions plants and, steel plants and things like that. Tear up the infrastructure.
I don't know how many years ago my uncle passed away, but it's been a few anyways. He would have been in his 90s. He was either a young teen or a preteen during World War II. And I don't know where he actually lived because he was Italian from Italy, but he remembers running for his life because they were after Christians back then where he lived, and they were trying to round them up. But being a kid, him and his brothers and sisters and other kids got away. But he told me some horror stories, I don't know, within the last 20 years. wish I would have wrote notes down when he was talking to me about it, because it's hard to believe what other people went through when it don't go along with what history was taught.
Or just have recorded it also. That would be awesome.
Yeah, it would have. Because you could hear the sincerity in his voice, and it was like he was back there. It was happening again, you know. And he was still young enough then. It wasn't dementia or nothing talking. He was just, I don't know what brought the conversation up originally, but he just wanted somebody to know what went on. I'm sure his kids heard the stories before, but one of them's passed away, one lives far away, and I don't know where the daughter is. Poor economy of Michigan in the last 40 years dispersed everybody.
General Patton never mentioned all the letters he sent to his wife and other place about a Holocaust.
Have those letters been published yet by the family?
Some people have some, but no, not officially. Supposedly that's why they killed him, because he knew who were the criminals. He wanted to keep on going. He wanted to keep on going to the Soviet Union at that time.
Yeah,
And they,
stuff like that needs to be out.
Didn't they publish that in a book called Eisenhower's, or not Eisenhower's, Patton's Diaries?
You might be right. It's been a long time. I have read it. But my logic is, why did he not mention any of those things, all that atrocity that the German did? Because it didn't happen. Those 10 million, most of those photos were after the war on those concentration camp of the Allies. And most of those pictures we see, there were starvation or were Germans. Supposedly around 10 million died after the war.
Paul? Andy?
Yes, ma'am.
I have I wondered why you popped up there, because I have it on active speaker view. I was gonna play that Viva Barnes.
Okay.
But I have up my screen share. And last time I tried to do that on here, I still had to have my mic open on here, and I don't want to do that for background noise and stuff. And on Jitsi, when I would just share screen, it just comes through whatever. I wouldn't have to have my mic open. I don't want to do it if I have to do that. And Paul says there's a button somewhere that I'm not pushing, and I'm not seeing that right button, damn it.
I haven't played with those buttons yet, Lisa.
Stay away from the buttons till you talk to Paul.
I like the buttons.
I know you do. You like them too well, and it gets you in trouble, though.
Well, that one, it didn't. I just had to have my mic open, so any background noise, I'm going to go start putting dishes away. You ain't going to be able to hear the video.
Oh. I understand. I was just giving you a hard time. Because we know what you and buttons do. You got to push them, see what they do.
So could you hear that?
No. Didn't hear nothing.
That's what I see. It's not right. I don't want to have my mic open. I'm going to find this button. Paul, you better come help me. I'm going to push buttons.
Oh. Paul must be busy working or napping. I sure wish I had one of them fold-out lawn chairs I could get comfortable in. My last one kind of broke, and I never replaced it.
Just can't find the right frickin' button to push. Really sad.
Yeah, it is, because silence is making me want to take a nap. I just lay in the grass, but there's too many ants walking all over me, all over my feet as it is.
I'm gonna go over to Jitsi and do it.
Yeah, come visit me in Jitsi. I was in both, but free conference call booted me. So I had to come here and see what people were posting.
And then I want to talk about that dolphin. This is Miami Seaquarium.
Hey, Eduardo, I'm house here. It's an empty house, and it's good to see. We're gonna bankrupt you right out of Miami, and we're gonna take all your dolphins away soon. See you soon, Eddie.
And by the way, watch the dolphin. It's almost as though the dolphin decides to say, hey, Eddie, look at my butt. All right, I don't know who Eduardo is. Okay, hold on. We can stop with this now. Hold on. Stop.
Can everybody hear that?
Yes, I can. It was actually louder than people talking. I turned my volume down a tad.
All right. Andy, can you hear it over there? Is everybody okay with me playing this?
Fine with me.
Yeah, Lisa, I'll let you know if you don't want to watch the whole thing. At around, I think, 1:15, they talk about the affirmative action.
Oh, so I should maybe fast forward for about an hour and just listen to an hour and a half versus 2.5?
Well, I'm just letting you know that he does talk about cases in about 10 minutes, so you can listen to that. I'm just saying if you want to get to the affirmative actions, I think it's 1:15, something like that. And I don't care. I'm stepping away. Thank you so much, Lisa and Andy and everybody else. I yield.
Missouri says go for it. Go for it, Lisa.
Good evening, everyone. Remove this. Oh. I'm going to get into why I might look tired if I do. All right. For those of you who don't know who that is, that's Phil Damaris. Now, a very interesting thing, by the way, about this clip, and I don't know if it's a glitch, and I don't know, and before I accuse it of being, something chicanerous, when I go to try to open that clip in incognito, I'll show you what it shows for me. I cannot watch that clip in incognito. This is the clip I just cut and pasted right here. Boom shakalaka. Won't work. Retry. Now, I don't know if that means that clip is like flagged as adult only, or not adult, you know what I mean, like mature. And it won't come up except in a logged in account, because it doesn't come up in incognito. It doesn't come up when I'm logged out of my account. And I didn't get a warning for that video. Not that there's anything in that video that should be, requiring a warning. But it does lead me to believe that that might be an indication, not of a glitch, but rather of a method in which Twitter is dealing with Phil Damaris, the walrus whisperer. Okay, for those of you who don't know, Phil Damaris, the man you just saw right there, from Ontario, Niagara Falls region, used to be, or I think still is. Well, it doesn't matter what he does now. I don't want to get anybody in any trouble if they're not in trouble. He got involved in a decade-long litigation with Marineland. Everybody knows Marineland. Everybody loves Marineland. And I'm being sarcastic. In my Niagara Falls, Ontario. Everyone loves Marineland. Not everybody loves Marineland. Phil Demers used to work as an animal trainer at Marineland. He was known as the Walrus Whisperer because he developed a relationship with Smooshy the Walrus. Like Smooshy, when she was a calf, bonded with Phil. They had an amazing human-animal relationship, unique, singularly unique. It made Phil quasi-famous. He was on Wipeout Canada. He hit the news because of his connection with his walrus. He ended up leaving Marineland because he could not stand the way they were treating the animals there. He spilled the beans on how Marineland was treating their higher order mammals at Marineland. And then Marineland sued him, his girlfriend, and he was dragged into 10 plus years of lawfare with Marineland, who were notoriously litigious, notoriously, well, to the extent that they're notoriously litigious, I won't call them any names. They were notoriously they were proactive with lawsuits, but not with, making them go quickly, because they were trying to bankrupt and silence Phil Demers. He ended up coming out of that decades-long litigation somewhat victorious. Their lawsuit was dismissed, and he settled his cross-claim for abusive proceedings simply by ensuring that Smooshy the Walrus, who had then had a calf in that 10-year period, breeding walruses in captivity, ensuring that she would be transferred to a proper facility that Marineland was not, and it ended up happening. Smooshy was transferred to a place in Abu Dhabi. Apparently, it's beautiful, but Phil, I'm not sure that he can visit. All right, so that's how Phil became known as an animal rights activist through his litigation with Marineland. 10 plus years, it ended up with Marineland dropping their suit, Phil settling his counterclaim, Smooshy the Walrus, #free Smooshy, she got a good home in Abu Dhabi. He has set his sights on the Miami Seaquarium. Now, a few weeks ago, it was, the day before I left actually to drive back to Montreal, I went to Miami Seaquarium. I went to see the protest because he and his crew were organizing a protest there. And then Phil said, "You're not going to believe how bad it is inside unless you go in to see it." And I went in and I made a short documentary. I didn't know it was going to be as bad as it was. I went in there. For those of you who didn't see the video, maybe I won't play a clip for it now, but they have two manatees, one of which is 65 years old, and the other one I think is 40 years old, living in a glorified swimming pool. I mean, there are people with backyard pools bigger than the manatee den. The place was the most depressing place I've ever seen. Maybe the Bronx Zoo was a little more depressing. So I made a short documentary about that, but Phil Demers has now turned his sights on the Miami Seaquarium because behind the scenes of the depressing part that's open to the public, they've got an orca named Lolita. She's got another name now. I forget what her other name is because Lolita has unfortunate connotations. There's an orca living in a stadium that's not accessible to the public day in and day out. I'll show a video, actually. I have to show a video of that. Hold on. I'll show you what the conditions for orca currently look like. This is his Twitter feed. This is what the orca is currently living in. He got this footage, or I don't know that he got it, actually. Somebody got it by drone, which is going to lead us into another legal aspect of all of this. This is a killer whale, Lolita. Did I say orca or killer whale? Killer whale. Maybe they're the same thing. I might be an idiot. Forget it. Living in this fish tank. She's been there for, I don't know, decades. This stadium has been condemned. It's not open to the public anymore. This whale is sitting there basking in the open sunlight with a little little shadow portion. That is apparently that little fish there that you see is another type of dolphin. I forget what it is. That's intended to keep her company. I said, this is not a life for a gerbil, let alone a killer whale. Phil Demers has turned his sights to Eddie, who owns the Miami Seaquarium. And wants to wage the righteous war against Eddie. Phil Damaris got served with a lawsuit a couple of weeks ago. When I was there the day of, there was a bailiff or a process server trying to serve Phil Damaris with papers. And he was no longer there. The process server couldn't find him. It looks like they might have found him because Phil tweeted about how he's been served. He's been served with a lawsuit, something like an injunction, a no trespass, and a cease and desist from flying drones over the facility to capture aerial footage, because God forbid the world should see what's going on at the Miami Seaquarium in a part that's not accessible to the public. So that's Phil Damaris. And he, as far as I understand, I mean, the whole joke is I don't think he's welcome on the property. And like a true gangsta with an A, he's in there in front of that dolphin pool. Hey, Eddie, I got into your place here. I'm going to bankrupt you. Get rid of that freaking whale. The hashtag is a free Lolita, but I forget what the name is. And that's it. That was the intro today. I was going to start with the video of me getting shocked by an electric fence at a wedding I was at yesterday. But in order to see that, you'll have to go and join our community at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. All right, people, good evening. When Barnes gets here, we're going to put another story from Canada on Mega Blast. And that is basically, the Supreme Court of the United States of America, SCOTUS, issued a bunch of rulings last week that caused a blue checkmark meltdown, a blue checkmark avalanche of hysteria and insanity. There's one case that recently occurred in Canada where our Supreme Court refused to hear the appeal of a woman who was taken off an organ donor list in Alberta because she refused to get the jibby jab. It's a death sentence. It's nothing shy of it. I had her on last week. We're going to put that story on massive blast tonight. We're going to go over the Supreme Court rulings in the United States. We're going to talk about RFK. So don't Google free Lolita. Anyone in the chat, remind me if you can Google it. Remind me what her name is, because Lolita was her original name, and then or it was with a name, and then they changed it to something else. So we've got an amazing show tonight, because I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, and these days, giving people the benefit of the doubt, the blue check mark MSM propagandists, is to think that they're stupid, because it would be better to be stupid than to be dishonest, and they cannot be so stupid. It's just impossible. They can only be dishonest. The descriptions of the lawsuits, the analysis, the summaries, the hyperbole, whipping up people into outrageous frenzies on the interwebs, it can't be the product of stupidity, because nobody's that stupid, and nobody ascended to that level of society by being that stupid. They ascend there by being dishonest, and I'll dare say this, maliciously so. Okay, what I was going to say now, standard disclaimers. These beautiful things that you see here, these highlighted, colored, they're like tips, like interweb tips. They're called super chats on YouTube, and they're called Rumble rants on Rumble. YouTube takes 30% of all of this. So $5 is a Rumble rant, is a super chat. YouTube takes $2 of that. Hope I did the math properly. If you want to support us, you can go over to Rumble. They have the things called Rumble Rants. Rumble takes 20% ordinarily, but they're taking 0% for the rest of the year. And I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. What else was there? No medical advice, no legal advice, no election fortification advice. Let me read these, and then let me do my sponsor, because you may have known this video contains a paid promotion. Cheryl Gage, the Bud Light fiasco is a microcosm of America right now. Everyone is going to have to pick a side. I was going to start with the video of Barnes and I think it was over Christmas, like a year and a half ago, where I accused Barnes of drinking Bud Light. And I said, my goodness, if you're drinking Bud Light, it's going to shatter the image that I had of you in my soul before the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing. I never liked Bud Light. I was always, even though I know it's like the true American beer, who the hell wants to drink beer that has no flavor? I understand the low calorie aspect of it. You want to drink a lot of it so that you can, always have something in your hand, not get too drunk. If I'm drinking beer, I want Duvel, like a 9.5 to 11.5% Belgium triple fermented beer. I would like to have Mozit, Unibrew, one of the Unibrew products when they were good. Or I just like a martini. All right, what do you got here? I'm not your buddy guy says, I am fully convinced leftism is a civilizational cancer. It metastasizes until it ends the host. Their core values are the 7 deadly sins. We weren't the first and we won't be the last. It is very interesting. It's an interesting observation. I'm not your buddy guy. It could certainly be said of socialism, because socialism is parasitism. Communism is parasitism. You squeeze the money, you squeeze the intellect until there is nothing left to be squoze, and then you move on to a new host once your society collapses. Venezuela, the Soviet Union. It's ideological, economical parasitism. And so there's, you're not way out in left field on that. DT QC Viva, since you're in the Eastern Townships, what's your favorite poutine place? I'm no longer in the townships now. Favorite poutine place? I don't know. I had Lazy Dog poutine on Saint Laurent. It was delicious. Just so long as the cheese curds are fresh and the gravy is hot and melts the cheese curds, can be anywhere. $10 says, this is from Ian. After some questionable search terms announced, the FBI has entered the chat. Okay, what do we got here? TDS and now SCOTUS DS. It's amazing. Maybe the issue isn't either Trump or SCOTUS, but the deranged ones asking for a friend. Yes, the typo is intentional. And we got this one here. Viva, how do we help free the orca? I am crying slick. Go follow Phil Damaris on Twitter. He's on Instagram, and it's called Ocean... I forget what it's called. Go follow him on Twitter. Everybody, Phil Damaris. It's the Walrus Whisperer. One word, Walrus Whisperer. He's a great guy. Now, Barnes is in the backdrop. Before I bring him in, let me do one thing, because you may have noticed. This says this stream contains a paid promotion, which it does. We're switching it up tonight. It's not. I'm switching the Sunday night up from Field of Greens, which I love and use. Jen Yassel is getting the Sunday night stream tonight. And by the way, if I do I look tired? Let me see something here. Hold on a second. Where's my face? If I look tired, I'll tell you why I look tired afterwards. But if I look younger, hold on. Look at my face. If you don't see bags under my eyes, I've actually, as something of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not a gap. As a test, I've actually started using that retinol stuff under the bags under my eyes because I felt tired. I want to see if it actually makes a difference. And if you notice a difference, it is because of this, Jen Yassel. Now, Jen Yassel, look, I'm not very much into skincare. I'm not much into anything except maybe, hair care. But some people are. You got to wear suntan lotion, they say, to protect your skin from the sun, the aging effects of the sun, yada, yada, yada. Jen Yassel, as skincare products, it's not just that they work. They work to the degree that the founder of this company, an Egyptian pharmacist, came to America, started his pharmacy, made his own proprietary blends of skincare products, gave them out to his customers, and they said, the weekend comes around and then they come back on Monday, they say, that stuff works so well, make more of it for me. And that's how the company got started. They employ something like 50 some odd people. I think they're in, I want to say New Jersey or New York, but it's made in America. They are the sponsors of the New Jersey Devils. People vouch by their skincare products. They got the retinol skin firming one. And it's a product that literally sold itself and built its own business. That's how well it works. So go to jenyassel.com. You put in promo code VIVA. You'll get 70% off the most popular package. And that's it. If you're into that and you want to look young and you want to take care of your skin, that's how you do it. I will continue to be stubborn, but I might try new things. Just, there's nothing wrong with looking young, but I'm not going to dye my hair. I'm not going to dye my beard. Natural and pure, like the day I was born. Naked, kicking, screaming, and slimy and wet. All right. With that said, Barnes is in the backdrop. Barnes, I'm bringing you in 3, 2, 1. Sir, how goes the battle?
Good.
Robert, have you ever been shocked by an electric fence?
No.
So for everybody, you go to locals. We were at a wedding in the Eastern Townships. It was on a farm, and they had these lamb, and there was it looked like an electric fence, but I didn't know that it was on. And my kid says, "Can I touch it?" I said, "You can touch it. I think it's an electric fence." He touched it, Robert. I saw the spark, and it's like getting kicked in your nervous system. And he stops, and he was about to cry, and then he started laughing. And then I felt morally required to actually touch the same fence, so I tried some science. I'm not doing it again. He took it better than I did. It did not feel good. Robert, do you have a book? You do have a new book over the back of your shoulder.
Yeah, that's a biography of Abraham Lincoln written in 1888. Has a long, has some of his legal briefs from his legal days in it, stuff like that, which is cool. And it references a book that will come up in the affirmative action case discussion tonight. A great book called Lincoln at Gettysburg by Gary Wills. That might be our book of the month that we review at vivabarneslaw.locals.com because it's about the American Revolution finally expressing its full, complete meaning through the 14th Amendment and establishing equality for all, and that all men are, in fact and indeed, born free. And that the speech at Gettysburg is part of what is indirectly referenced by Justice Thomas in his concurrence as to an originalist understanding of the colorblind Constitution that we'll be discussing later.
Yeah, it's going to be a saucy episode tonight because, I mean, some of the takes on some of those decisions were amazing. And you have to remind me of Ben Shapiro's. It's like a burn that you lick your finger and you go, tss, and it was a legit burn on the Ketanji Brown Jackson dissent in that. Robert, do you want to highlight our topics, and we'll start with the first on the list?
Yeah, so the first announcement off the top, on Wednesday, I will be discussing the social, political, and cultural impact of the affirmative action decision with Michael Malice on his show. And on Wednesday, going to be doing a special edition show with the Duran, almost like a hush-hush style, where we explore the alternative explanations for the Russian coup and kind of do it like if you were in an intel briefing back room trying to deconstruct what may have happened. Look at the 4 prominent alternative theories being promoted, the evidence in favor of them, the arguments against them, the repercussions and ramifications if a particular interpretation is the accurate one. So that will be fun. We'll do that live on Wednesday with the Duran. On Friday, I discussed some of the affirmative action social political impact with America's Untold Stories, Eric Hunley and Mark Robert. You can see that there. And then on top of that, discuss the economic impact and the impact on the sort of political policy with George Gammon on his show, Rebel Capitalist Live. So we'll be discussing the legal constitutional impact here. Just upfront announcement. For those that wondered, I did plan on being on vacation this week, but plans changed. So we're doing the show. Anyhow, plan vacation will be delayed till August. Tonight, bonus topic off the top, a lot of people had asked about was another announcement. We will go to locals at the end of this, do a locals exclusive portion of the show, where we'll be answering some of the questions that have been asked, the top 5 most liked questions on 2 different posts, and be answering any live tip chat that's at least $5. The reason for that is some people were bombarding with $1 or $2, and we wouldn't be able to reach them all. So that's why those are the ones we guarantee we answer. And that's at vivabarneslaw.locals.com, where everybody's above average. First up, the bonus top of understanding Robert Kennedy's campaign. And people think that his reaction to a lot of issues this week hurt him. It didn't, given who his audience actually is. The Canadian Horror Show, which you can talk about and have talked about, did an interview with the denial of a right of an organ donor just based on vaccination status as Canada continues to sink into oblivion. We'll discuss both France and Farage in the separate section on locals, because that was a common question there, as well as the Bill Gates mosquito problem. But for the main show for here on Rumble, we'll have Eric Hunley. Is he going to jail? So then a lot of big Supreme Court cases. First up will be the Title VII religious rights case, how that impacts vaccine mandates. A big California case on vaccine mandates. The Trader Joe's update, that case that we talked about at the very onset of all of these issues. Then we'll be discussing the Supreme Court's affirmative action case. Then the Supreme Court's Biden student loan case. Then the Supreme Court's election clause case. Then the Supreme Court's free speech cases on true threats and the rights of religious expression for creative enterprises against attempts to call it discrimination. The 16th Amendment case that we've talked about, Supreme Court took it up. We'll discuss what some of the ramifications of that may be. That was the most popular by a small margin on the Viva Barnes Law Locals Board. Then we have the foreign reach of domestic laws in the trademark context, which has some broader ramifications. Jurisdiction over corporations and due process. A big class action got filed suing OpenAI over its ChatGPT and about how it really may have monetized information it stole from users. And then as a last bonus topic, the Pence card and how it is playing a role in both the Eastman and Clark so-called disbarment cases.
All right, well, I'm going to start with the, we're going to have a big audience for this story. I think a lot of people probably know about it, but maybe they don't. I'm going to put the link to her Give, Send, Go. This is Sheila Annette Lewis. Robert, I don't know if there's been cases like this in the United States. And like with this and with the commission on Justin Trudeau's Emergencies Act invocation, I didn't find that, you know, the big podcast platforms in the States were paying the requisite degree of attention to this, because when the right to protest gets stifled and violently shut down in Canada and then ratified by an independent commission, it's not long off until that trickles down to the states, or at the very least some states within the states, California and New York. I don't know how many cases there have been of people denied organ transplant in the United States. This is the most egregious one I've ever seen. She's a 58-year-old woman. It's not like she's a 95-year-old woman who has no chance of a successful transplant. 58-year-old woman with a degenerative condition, which she's not at liberty to discuss because of the gag order in the case. She can't mention her organ. She can't mention the hospital that is refusing to do the transplant. She can't mention the doctors who have provided this, guidance that you must take the COVID jab in order to remain on the organ donor list. 58-year-old woman, a degenerative disease diagnosed in 2019. When she was diagnosed and had to be put on the list, or was going on the list, they had some criteria. She needed to get up to speed on all of her vaccines. And she's from the east of Canada, Nova Scotia, I think, and now she's living in Alberta. She didn't have that. She didn't have it digitized or whatever. So she actually went through a full session of legit, time-tested and true vaccines, if anybody still believes in that. Then it came time for them to say, in 2021, you got to get the Rona jab. Otherwise, we're going to take you down from a 2 on the list, which is like the most urgent for an organ, to 0. And they did, because she refused to get the jab. And then they ultimately took her off the list. Save a lot of time on this. She went to the lower courts to revise the hospital's decision. The lower court said, we're not getting involved with what is quintessential medical advice, medical guidance. Doctors say they think in their expert advice, you need to do this. This is part of the program. If you don't want to do it, you're free to die. Court of Appeal comes in and says, same decision, basically. It's not a charter violation because it's not a government guideline to impose this requirement. And so it's not as though these doctors are abiding by government guidelines. It's their own professional medical opinion. And they say it's not a charter violation. We defer, we ratify, or we reaffirm the lower court's decision. But even if it were a charter right at issue, it's your decision. It's not a charter violation. I guess you don't have a right to life in Canada. You have the right to do what they say you need to do in order to get the right to life. Supreme Court says we're not hearing the case, thus sealing her judicial death sentence. And now she's got to raise about $1 million within the week since the story. I think her Give, Send, Go has gone from 70,000 to 110,000. So she can now do preliminary tests in Texas that don't have this requirement. And then the procedure, if she's approved, is going to cost upwards of $1 million Canadian. And I try to steel man it, Robert. I understand how the doctors can say, this is, we're not going to give a liver transplant to a raging alcoholic. We're not going to give a lung transplant to a smoker. If you don't want to abide by the logical, scientifically tested guidelines, we can't put you on the list because there's other people who are going to be better off in terms of receiving and tolerating that organ. And so that's the steel man. I've been putting a lot of pressure on the Premier of Alberta because I know that she follows me on Twitter, and I'm not calling her names, I'm calling her out, that if she remains silent while one of her citizens is allowed to die, that's a very big problem, especially coming from, this is Danielle Smith, who's the recently elected Premier of Alberta, especially since she was recently the one who said there has been no group more discriminated against in recent memory than the unvaccinated. If she remains silent and lets one of her citizens die, that's a very big problem. That's the steel man. And so, Robert, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Have you heard of anything like this out of the States? And is this one of those cases where we're walking the line between doctors have to have independence, but they can't have independence to do absolutely outrageous things? And do we want politicians saying, doctors, we as politicians are going to override your medical expert opinion?
I mean, it has come up in the U.S., but to my knowledge, hasn't reached a litigation stage. And I'm not sure if anyone was finally denied, because I think they were going through appeals processes and the rest. Do you have medical malpractice laws in California and Canada?
We do, and that is the next venue that she's taking right now. So she's lost on the charter application. Supreme Court said we're not even taking it. Now they're going after a medical malpractice lawsuit. But Robert, what faith would I have in that lawsuit succeeding if the courts, the lower court of appeals and Supreme Court, have deferred effectively to the guidance? It's medical opinion par excellence. We're not getting involved. I wouldn't see the courts getting involved. I mean, I guess they could adjudicate or adduce evidence that would show that it's actually totally frivolous malpractice. Her lawyer said it, Robert. I mean, it makes total sense. I forgot to mention, she also has natural immunity, robust natural immunity. Her T cells, whatever it is, are very high. Robust natural immunity, where her doctor said there's strictly no benefit to imposing this. There is only risk. So that's that. We do have it. It's not worth what it is in the United States by any means in Canada, but that's her next and last venue, other than raising the money to do it herself.
Yeah, I mean, I think medical malpractice may be the only avenue available in Canada under these existing circumstances. The only other question is whether or not some degree of Nuremberg or international human rights may be applicable, somehow enforceable in Canadian law, but I don't know what the status of that is.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm going to follow it. I'm just sending this. Tag everybody when you send the Give, Send, Go, because unfortunately, to raise $1 million, the Give, Send, Go has to go quasi-viral. It takes more than a bunch of motivated individuals who are within the community. So the story's outrageous. I've been DMing it to everyone that I have a direct contact with in the States, because I think America needs to be looking at this, because this will trickle down. It's not a question. Once the precedent has been set and tolerated in a Western democracy, it will spread. It will metastasize like a cancer, proverbially speaking. Robert, do we head over to Rumble now?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Okay, everybody, I'm going to share the link one more time for those who are new. What we do is we start on YouTube and Rumble. We end on YouTube, go to Rumble exclusively with locals in the backdrop, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Then we have a little after party at vivabarneslaw.locals.com, ending on YouTube. Now come on over to Rumble, people. There should be 2,789 people migrating now. All right, Robert, RFK. Do I get the impression you like Robert RFK Jr. a lot?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, he's a client, a friend of mine, very good mind, very good heart. And that's where, like, if you have somebody that has a good mind, good heart, good methods of learning information, that's about as good as you can get, because often what they face in public office is not anticipated. And historically, people with the right methods of learning and deciding things, with the right mind and heart, are more trustworthy and reliable in positions of power than people who say all the things and check all the boxes that you want said and checked. So this week, I mean, the thing to understand about Robert Kennedy is his default position is his Uncle Ted Kennedy's liberal democratic tradition. So it's on those issues where he's made a deeper inquiry, where he often has dissident opinions and populist positions. And so he has populist positions on censorship, on social media control, on openness of dialogue and debate, on war, on foreign policy, on trade, on global relationships, on vaccines, on COVID, on mandates, on public health, on big agriculture, on the national security establishment and the deep state and the intelligence community, including also on elections. So on those areas, he has all populist positions. On your conventional social cultural issue, he has default democratic positions. So, and that's, and for him, he is right now competing in the Democratic primary to get votes amongst Democrats and independents who will vote in the Democratic primary, to get donors that want to see him succeed in the Democratic primary, and volunteers that want to see him succeed in the Democratic primary. In that context, his audience generally supports all the same positions that he has announced on these other issues that the court adjudicated. So your average Democrat is pro-choice, is for gun control, for assault weapon bans, for affirmative action, though that one's a little bit closer, actually. We'll get into that a little bit more when we discuss the affirmative action aspect. On all those kind of issues, he's echoing what Democrats believe. And so you get some conservatives and Republicans that agree with him on the populist side, don't agree with him on these other issues, and they get strangely agitated. And it's like, well, why? Twofold. One is that's not who his audience is. He raised $1 million in a day this week, which was, set a record for an independent outsider candidate like him in the Democratic process. He continues to do well in terms of social media access, volunteers. Volunteers are going to be doing RFK support rallies at July 4th parades all across the country over the weekend and on July 4th. So he's doing very well in all those categories. And if he came out and said and had a Republican position on a bunch of these other issues, all it would do is diminish his chance to do anything in the Democratic Party and diminish the populist causes that he is voicing, because those people would just completely tune him out. That you have people who are pro-choice but are willing to listen to how their ideas of bodily autonomy should extend to the issues of vaccine mandates. You have people that are pro-gay rights that would be amenable to extending that to religious freedom issues. So there's a range of places where he can reach the Democratic voter group to expand and extend a populist message on populist issues that he would forfeit if he decided to embrace Republican conservative positions on everything. So it's not in his interest at all to be pursuing Republican positions on these other issues. And so the people get agitated. It's like, he's a Democrat. He's a liberal Democrat with a bunch of good populist positions on issues that really matter to the populist community. And his best benefit is extending and expanding the audience for that and the support for it in an otherwise hostile circle of Democratic primary voters. And so the people understand that then they won't necessarily react like some have, like, oh, I'm mad Bobby Kennedy doesn't have Donald Trump's views on abortion or gun control or gay rights or any of those issues. So there was some controversy because Moms for Liberty was doing a national conference. They'd invited him, and he had initially accepted the invitation. Then he got blowback. Some of the blowback was misrepresentations of what Moms for Liberty is about, but it's not really controvertible that Moms for Liberty is an overwhelmingly conservative and Republican-leaning group. So it wouldn't do him a great benefit, frankly, to go there. Now, if I were him, I would have handled it differently in the debate about responding to it. Otherwise, he'll keep falling for that trap. Why associate with so-and-so? Why affiliate with so-and-so? Why appear on such and such? That he should go to his other position, which is he wants debate and dialogue across all political lines. Otherwise, we won't get any improvement in society writ large. And that should have been his response rather than to forego the invitation. But otherwise, his response makes sense given within the Democratic primary, one of the narratives they're pushing, and they used his acceptance of the Moms for Liberty invitation as a pretext to run the story, and Mother Jones and Daily Beast and a bunch of other places says, see, he's really just a Trump plant. And Democratic voters will tune him out if that narrative sticks. So he's doing what he needs to do to get the populist message to a difficult audience and to improve his standing in the Democratic primary. And so that all of that makes sense. So for those that are upset at him, they're just not recognizing the political situation as it exists.
Robert, it feels like Robert F. Kennedy, RFK Jr. is like the first politician in a long time that is making people understand that you are necessarily not going to agree with each and every position espoused by a politician, nor should you, because it wouldn't be normal if you did. It would be tribalism if you were to. When people call him a Democrat, I would call him a traditional Democrat, where I think some of the views that he has, even on women's choice, they're going to be considered radical by the majority of or by a large portion of Democrats these days, because it's the traditional Democrat is today's sort of conservative. But people need to understand you're not going to agree with everything any one person says if you've ever even agreed with everything you've said. And Trump, the whole Trump thing, it's a bit different where people are almost reluctant to disagree with anything Trump says. Let me rephrase that. There is a certain bigger degree of tribalism where people don't even want to address constructive criticism with Trump per se, because it just lends into the DeSantis battle. But RFK comes around and says, look, you're not going to agree with everything I say. I understand that he says it in his interviews. You're not going to. You don't have to. but we're going to make it work and we're going to listen to each other. And I love listening to him in interviews. I forget which one I was listening to today, where he basically, he's just so polite in the way that he's needling Joe Biden. We're like, he says, asked, you might not get a debate. He's like, well, I wouldn't want to debate me either. If I'm Joe, I wouldn't want to debate. There's no upside to that. He's amazing on social media. You may not agree with everything he has to say, but nor should you agree with everything any one person has to say.
Yeah, and I think Owen Schroyer had a really good take. He was like, there's a bunch of things I disagree with him on, but I don't think he's out to destroy my life. I think he comes from the right place. He just have disagreements on policy, but if you come from the right place, that's a manageable political dynamic, as opposed to people who have just hostile, malevolent intentions. And I think if he took a deep dive on some of these, if you look at his history, when he's taken a deep dive on positions, he's often deviated from the default Democratic position. And I mean, even to the degree of the assassination of his father, as he discussed with Bill Maher, he'd always just assumed it was Sirhan and refused to even look at it even any further until someone else who had been shot that night, who was a longstanding friend of his father, asked him to look at the autopsy. And he said when he looked at it, he realized that it was a respect for the same with vaccines, that a lot of mothers of vaccine injured kept coming to him. And that's when he, out of respect for them, he did a deep dive. And what he has shown is a very rare trait in public officials these days, which is a willingness to completely reverse positions upon reviewing and researching the information. It's a methodological approach that improves the quality of his decision making. And on some of these other issues, I don't think he's taken a real deep dive. And I think if he did, I think there'd be a more moderated position that comes out, because I think he's more in the tradition of his father and Uncle President John Kennedy than he is in Senator Ted Kennedy's history. I think Ted Kennedy's kind of his default position, but it varies when he takes a deep dive and shows a stronger instinct with his father and his Uncle President John Kennedy than the other way around. And a lot of these issues weren't big issues when Robert Kennedy Sr. and John Kennedy were in politics.
Robert, on America's Untold Stories, I was watching it. I was in the chat. I didn't chime in the chat. But Grobert asked you, "What is RFK Jr.'s path to victory for the Democrats?" And I was sitting there screaming at my phone. He doesn't have a path to victory. Am I being overly cynical, or does he simply realistically never have a path to victory for the Democrats? And then the question is going to be running as an independent and potentially splitting the Democrat vote. Or, I don't know, some sort of group effort, team effort with Trump, because I don't see Trump not getting the nomination for the GOP. Does he have? Is it too cynical? He has no path to victory for the Democrats?
Well, two things. He's ruled out ever running as an independent, and he's ruled out ever being a Republican or running on a Republican ticket. So in terms of to him, he's only running for the Democratic nomination. If he doesn't get it, that ends the political aspect of his campaign. The difficulty he faces is that no incumbent president who ran has ever lost. Now, there are two incumbent presidents that chose not to run because of their concern and that they would lose, and that's Harry Truman in 1952 and Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1968. And LBJ dropped out because his dad ran. As soon as his dad announced, LBJ couldn't handle the idea of getting humiliated by Bobby Kennedy, so he dropped out rather than run for re-election. Otherwise, the closest races were in 76 and 80. His uncle, Ted Kennedy, challenged Jimmy Carter in 1980, was ahead in the polls for a period of time, ended up losing to Jimmy Carter by about 10 points. Ted Kennedy couldn't break out of what was then the liberal base. And what's still kind of currently the liberal base. So Ted Kennedy did well in the Northeast and the Southwest, but he couldn't break through anywhere else really in the country, Midwest or the South. Ronald Reagan challenged Gerald Ford in 1976. There's still in 76 and 80, there still weren't as many primaries as there are today. But Reagan got very close to knocking off Gerald Ford. But Ford had never been elected, so it was a little bit of a different dynamic. He had come in as the replaced vice president for Nixon after the 72 election. So that's why people say historically he's got to do something that's never been done before. The other aspect is that the second aspect is the obstacle of the Democratic Party. They have a lot of superdelegates. They're going to rig a lot of rules. So the belief is that it'll be tough for him to overcome the Democratic Party's institutional hostility to him. And then the third is money, is that the big money in media, that the big money and big media will try to blacklist him and blackball him as much as possible. YouTube and Google are already proactively doing that by removing interviews with Robert Kennedy. They did so with Jordan Peterson. I mean, with high-profile individuals, threatening other YouTube makers that their channels will be struck if they simply interview Robert Kennedy. So Google is already conspiring to try to limit his podcast strategy of reaching voters directly and circumventing the institutional media. So those are the hurdles, and those are big, big hurdles. Now, the flip side is, if for any reason Biden were to not run in 2024, then he's in a prime position to take the lead, like his father did in 1968. The other argument he would make is that the same precedent was broke by Trump to a degree. Nobody outside of who had never held public office had ever won the presidency before, and Trump did. I think there's differences there, but he's right that when Trump announced, most insiders thought it was impossible for Trump to win. Trump was as low as a 50-1 underdog, even when he was leading in polls at times. And Nate Silver famously ruined his reputation by staking his claim that Trump would never win, ever, all the way through the entire election. And so then had to write a mea culpa later about what he got wrong. He still didn't figure out what he got wrong. So those are the reasons why Robert Kennedy has a chance. I think it really depends on, can he break, like the problem Ted Kennedy really had was he could not break through with black voters. So he had enough of the old white Catholics in the North and white liberals. Now, white liberals will not be voting for Robert Kennedy, white professional class liberals, just like they didn't vote for his father. His father was able to put together a coalition that somewhat doesn't exist in Democratic primary anymore. The old working class whites have mostly left. So the question is, can he break through amongst younger voters and millennials and Zoomers and the working class portions of those, and African-American and Mexican-American voters? And that's as well as Puerto Ricans in certain places of the country. That will be the open question. And we'll see. He's going to make I think he'll be the most significant. There's been candidates like him, Tulsi Gabbard in 2020. Dennis Kucinich before that, who's managing Kennedy's campaign now. Fred Harris, if you go all the way back to 1976, senator from Oklahoma, who took a populist streak. They usually couldn't get above 3 to 5% of the polls. So they got the hardcore anti-war dissident voice, but they couldn't break out. Robert Kennedy's already between 15 and 20%. Joe Biden's found base is about 30-35% of people who have a very favorable opinion of him within the Democratic Party. It's hard to so what Robert Kennedy has to do is win almost all the voters that in the Democratic process that don't have a very favorable view of Biden. Those are overwhelmingly young, working class voters and Mexican American and black voters. So can he break through? That's the real open question. We won't know until the votes start coming in.
People say, they said it was impossible with Trump also, but with Trump winning the nomination for the GOP, it's a little different because whether or not the GOP and the DNC both play dirty, in my experience of the last, 7 years, the DNC plays ultra, super duper dirty. But I wanted to bring up one chat. Where was it? It says here. Sancho Relaxo says RFK is anti-tribalism. He said so. He wants to unite the nation. Like Robert said, the man is open-minded, rational, and can be convinced. And then it says, David, reviens dans le Nord. Come back to the North. I'm here now for a little bit. And then I just had two more here. If you need to have pronouns to be addressed by, you are part of the problem. Get woke. Go stand on the corner. And then there was should have grounded yourself, Eva. All right, Robert. Now look, speaking of playing dirty and ending up in jail, Eric Hunley. I mean, this is we did an emergency live stream last Tuesday. He calls me up. He sounded kind of like he's laughing, but you can tell when someone's nervous because this doesn't happen to everybody every day. Hunley apparently had gotten a call from the special prosecutor. Is that it is the special prosecutor, right? In the Alec Baldwin Rust shooting investigation, because they wanted to know who was Hunley's source for the rumor of the plinking that had been going on set. Plinking is using a real firearm, the prop firearm, which is a real gun, to shoot cans, target practice while you're killing time, so to speak. Oh, that's a bad pun. Not intended. While you're, wasting time on set. And so we know that there were live rounds on set. They found them. There were a bunch intermingled with the dummy rounds, the blank rounds. And Hunley had a source. He's been getting information in the context of this investigation, who, told Hunley. The rumor is that on set they were plinking. This news was reported by New York Post, by other outlets as well. He gets a call. He gets a call. Ends up on the line with Nate, the lawyer. As his lawyer, Hunley shuts his mouth and listens. And they want to know his source, and he says no. And then they say, "We're going to issue a warrant, or we're going to issue a subpoena." Did I say a subpoena or a warrant? I forget which now. Whatever. Robert, I asked Hunley after, it's like, are you sure it wasn't not a prank, but a journalist pretending to be a special prosecutor to get your source so they can go after it? The number matched up, so it looks like it was legit. What's your take on it, Robert? I mean, does he have anything to worry about?
Well, he was totally nonchalant. He was telling me he doesn't care. He doesn't, you tell the prosecutor to shove off. He's ready to do some time in jail. He's ready to go. No worries there at all for Hunley. He's just a little vacation maybe for a period of time. But what the prosecutor is doing is deeply problematic, and we're probably going to see more of it. It's prosecutors going after independent journalists, independent content creators, independent members of the media, who get independent sources who disclose problems with prosecutions particularly. And the journalist shield law varies by jurisdiction. So the federal common law, federal courts have adopted a degree of protection of journalists, colloquially called shield laws. And so that can apply in federal proceedings, civil or criminal. In state proceedings, it's governed by state law, and that varies completely by state. In New Mexico, they have a very robust shield law. What he was quoting from when he was with you was the New Mexico's standard for shield law, which basically protects confidential information and the confidentiality of sources. And what the government has to prove, or any private litigant in a civil case has to prove to get that information, is something that kind of looks like strict scrutiny. In other words, a compelling need for the information, and that the only means of getting it is getting that information from that source. Now, the proper way this should be done is a subpoena gets issued. And because it's, he lives in Virginia, the case is in New Mexico, they need to go through certain processes to get the local Virginia to enforce a New Mexico subpoena, because the New Mexico state court subpoena is not generally enforceable outside the territory of New Mexico. And then he would have an opportunity to contest it, go to court and say, so even assuming they go through that, they get it properly served, they get the interstate approval by either he consents to it or Virginia agrees to help out, then he can go in and say, here's why this information should still be confidential. They don't have a compelling need for it, and they have other means, and they haven't exhausted those means or proven they've exhausted those means. I think the special prosecutor knows she would not win a subpoena to get the information. So what was disturbing about what he was talking about was the extraordinary abuse of prosecutorial power to use a search warrant instead. And the reason why they would use a search warrant is twofold. One is to circumvent the subpoena requirements, prevent him an opportunity to object to what they're seeking. But the second reason is because they could get a lot more information without him even knowing what they got. Because the way a search warrant would work in that context is they wouldn't try to go search Eric's home, because that would require them to get Virginia state approval. That causes all kinds of hurdles. What they want instead is to search his phone provider, search his email provider, search his social media provider. And you can bet they would have searched a lot more and seized a lot more than even could possibly apply to the circumstances they were describing here. Like here they're saying, we want your source that said this was happening. But my guess is they would use it as an opportunity to do a sneak peek and deep dive into all of his sources, into all the information that they could get their grubby hands on. And so it's a clear abuse of prosecutorial power. Now, in the 10th Circuit, which is where New Mexico resides for federal purposes, he would have two legal remedies. One is Title 42 USC 1983, which is that anybody who executes or crafts a search warrant without probable cause of that person committing a crime. As good as prosecutor thinks I can just issue search warrants for evidence of crimes, even if the person I'm searching has committed no crime. And here it wouldn't even be evidence of a crime she was searching for. It's evidence to support a different criminal allegations. That's not the case. You're not allowed to do search warrants without probable cause of a crime for which the evidence is that you're searching, and she didn't have any. And then the second problem is, for the prosecutor, the Federal Privacy Protection Act, that a lot of people don't know about, is designed in particular to protect journalists. And by the way, anybody's a journalist. If you're in the news gathering business, you're a journalist. You don't have to have some certification. You don't have to have a special degree. This has been litigated repeatedly. I litigated it in the Alex Jones case, and even a very hostile judge acknowledged and admitted that it covered Alex Jones. That it covers anybody in the news gathering business. It looks at the purpose of your activity, not the credentials you may have or the platform that you're broadcasting from. So this clearly covers him and his activity. And under the Federal Privacy Protection Act, they can't seize this kind of information without meeting certain standards, which are not met here. And here's the big thing for a prosecutor: if you're individually involved in the search, then you can be sued and do not have immunity under the Federal Privacy Protection Act. If you are involved in either the drafting of the warrant or the execution of the search, then you do not have prosecutorial immunity from 1983 federal civil rights violations. And in those cases, of course, your attorney's fees, they have to pay if they lose. So it looks to me like he has a robust federal civil rights and Federal Privacy Protection Act claim against this rogue prosecutor, should she go forward and execute the search warrant.
I was watching you again with America's Untold Stories. Some of the rants for Hundley were the most hilarious rants ever.
Yeah, folks, send him memes about him being in jail. He finds that really funny. He's like, that's so good.
Oh, all right, amazing. Robert, we're going to get into SCOTUS now. I think I have to check the list. Before we do that, I think we've fallen well behind on some of these. Let's do some Rumble rants, and then we're going to get into the Supreme Court decisions. I just tweeted out at Elizabeth Warren, who yet again referred to the Supreme Court justices as extremists. There should be some sort of political punishment for that. Tropical Rocket says, why is anti-vax a pejorative? That means I don't want one. You can do what you want. The other side tries to compel other people to do things. The pejorative is vaxxers. Tropical Rocket says, would like to see Barnes talk to Lynn Alden about the best financial mind out there, in my opinion. Oh, about the best.
Paul,
Yes.
are you snacking?
Oh, damn. I'm sorry. Keep that pause. Let me reset the conference room.
Okay.
I heard crunch of the potato chips. Sounded like.
I know, and that's it's like, let me get my computer and pause this. Maybe he wants to say something with his mouth full of chippies.
I think he just took a break from maybe packing or working, and
Yep. But I wasn't sure. So.
Thank you for joining us for the Radio Ranch with Roger Sales. Press *6 to mute and unmute.
There are 9 participants in the conference.
I got another question I want to ask Paul real quick too.
Okay.
I'm thinking of it again. The room got chaotic earlier with conversation. I didn't want to change the subject.
Okay. Rich, you got to bail out and come back in.
Okay.
Paul, did you hear me paging you?
No, I had my internet went out.
Oh.
I just got it back up a few minutes ago.
Oh you were still showing on here because I'm just like, I don't know where he's at.
That's because Studio E is not in my house.
Oh, because I was paging you looking for buttons. Like, Paul, I'm going to start pushing buttons. I need assistance. You got to stop me. I'm going to push them, but I can't find the right buttons to push. So I ended up over here because I cannot figure out on free conference call how to share my screen and the audio come through without my mic being open. And that defeats the damn purpose of sharing screen to me.
Right.
And you had said that there's a somewhere a button about something with the mic, and I just didn't see it anywhere. So I was getting frustrated, and it's like, well, you know what? I know how to do this on Jitsi. I'm just going to Jitsi. It'll still share between rooms. So that was my solution. I figured it out for myself without fucking stuff up, I think.
You think?
So long as I wasn't the cause of anybody's internet shit that you said went on.
No, it should have been just fine. So everybody in free conference call, does the audio sound okay in there? Hello, free conference call.
They be sleeping.
Does the audio sound okay in there?
Yep.
Actually,
Sounds good for here.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. All right, Lisa. So
Well,
you
Rich
can,
had a question for you first, so I'm going to let him ask his question before I start it again.
And
okay, Rich.
on Roger's computer updating at the wrong time, apparently. Couldn't you turn them off, or don't you want that done?
I have already actually installed software that blocks Windows updates. I have no idea what update he's talking about. It could have been an update for any one of his apps. I don't think it was Windows 10.
Okay.
It was it could have either been VLC, or it could have been Butt, or it could have been Opera, or it could have been Brave. It could have been anything updating.
Well, I just know, now that you say that, I know my apps must do some kind of secret update without, because they don't tell you on them different apps, but I noticed the app is different after I log back in.
Right.
So something had to happen. So, okay, I was just curious about his, because this is not the first time he had technical difficulties after an update.
Right.
Okay, that's all I wanted to mention before I forgot again.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Lisa, give it a whack.
Both the best financial mind out there. All right. We got the Bronx 183. Good health and happiness to you and Barnes and the families. Thank you very much. Sancho Relaxo, Hunter Thompson, waking up to the controlled opposition that was George McGovern to Nixon's run in Fear and Loathing. I have to watch that movie again. I watched it when I was way too young, understood nothing, and didn't like it, but I can give it a second try. It's a very useful read. Can Barnes explain how Trump can be charged for January 6th criminally when he was acquitted of January 6th impeachments? I know impeachment isn't punitive and is office removal, but isn't not guilty. Robert, do you want to? We've discussed
We'll cover that once if they cross that.
Okay. All right, Robert. Let me see what we have. What list? What order are we going in with this?
So a really big Title VII case that covers religious discrimination. In other words, vaccine mandates don't come up in the case. It is the major issue that was the major hurdle for relief and remedy for those who were fired after they asserted religious objections to the vaccine mandates.
This title, this religious rights one was the the USPS guy who didn't want to work on Sunday. That's the all right. So the summary of that, everybody, is that this postal worker, I don't remember if it's USPS or whatever. Didn't want to work on Sunday because Sunday is the Sabbath for Christians, and said, I have a deeply held religious belief. I don't want to work on Sunday. I'll work any other day. Just, let's make the schedules work. They claimed it was an undue hardship under the law. But Robert, you're going to have to flesh out this distinction. Undue hardship if it causes a de minimis interruption to the business, as was the criteria for the last, however many decades. The story had been sort of misrepresented in the media as this postal worker winning his case. He didn't win his case yet. It goes down now to be reconsidered under the new criteria for when a company is required to accommodate, and what is it reasonable accommodations for religious beliefs means. Because tell me, have I misunderstood it, that the threshold was reasonable accommodations, but if it caused a de minimis interruption to the business, the company could say this is an undue burden. Sorry, so we're not accommodating it, and we're not going to accommodate your religious beliefs. Supreme Court says no, the de minimis criteria had been widely abused for too long. It allowed companies to say, we're not even going to try. Oh, well, there's a slight inconvenience, we're not going to accommodate. And so it has to actually be an undue hardship for the company, which has to mean interfering meaningfully with its business in order to accommodate. So they say, throw it back down. Post office guy, you get your new trial, your new hearing once again, because it had reached the end of it. And it's going to be assessed under this new criteria from the Supreme Court that revises what had been the standard for several decades. Is that accurate enough of a summary?
Yeah. Essentially, that other standard was a standard that was never established by the Supreme Court. It was a throwaway line in an old case that lower courts had used as their pretext. So the requirement, no employer that fits certain definitions, covered employers under the Federal Civil Rights Act. So not every employer is covered, but most are, and is not allowed to discriminate at all, not just in terms of termination, but in any condition or term of any condition of employment as it relates to religion. The Congress had gone in and made clear that included an obligation to reasonably accommodate anyone who had a religious objection to any aspect of employment, and that to any term or condition of it. But there was a carve out. You didn't have to reasonably accommodate if it would impose a, quote, undue hardship on you as an employer. The undue hardship language had been diluted to be just a little bit above a de minimis burden. And also what was being included as an undue hardship was if coworkers just objected, or customers objected, or vendors objected. So if they didn't like something about somebody, I don't want to be served by somebody in a turban. I don't want to be served by someone with a beard. Or in the vaccine mandate context, I don't want to work with someone who hasn't taken the vaccine. So so that was the big hurdle in all the vaccine mandate cases, is there were a lot of employers holding on hope that lower courts would excuse their complete failure to reasonably accommodate, because under this misinterpretation of the civil rights laws. So the Supreme Court came in and clarified, unanimous decision, made clear that the words undue hardship mean what they sound like. And that isn't more than a de minimis standard. That is, first, a hardship, which means extreme privation, adversity, negative impact. And undue means an excessive and unjustifiable extreme privation, hurdle, handicap. And then they made clear this is about the monetary cost of doing the business. So it has to be substantial, and it cannot include the bias or prejudice of the specific religious belief concerning from other employees or other customers or other vendors or anybody else. It's got to be, well, we can't accommodate you to work from home because our business model requires you to provide direct customer service. And let's say that was the accommodation that was being sought, or any other accommodation, testing accommodation in the case of the vaccine mandates, or even just evaluating whether vaccine even had any relevance to spread in the first place, all those things. The other thing they were doing is they were just assessing the reasonableness of an accommodation. They made no effort to actually accommodate. And the Supreme Court made clear you can't do that either. It's basically a strict scrutiny type analysis. Do you have a compelling interest in your business to have this requirement that you can't accommodate? And is the means by which you're requiring this condition of the business, is it really narrowly tailored to serve that compelling business interest? Or all there are alternatives? Are there other ways you could accommodate your business need and this religious need of the individual employee? And you've got to make efforts to look at the risk reward of every single one. And you've got to do everything you can to actually accommodate, not just assess an accommodation. And in the process of doing so, you have to look at all the options, all the alternatives available to you that could meet and balance the interest of your business versus the employee. And that's got to be financial concerns of the business. And those financial concerns cannot be driven by bias and prejudice of either of the religion as a whole or of the substantive particular specific iteration of it or expression of it in that context. In this case, employers can no longer say, well, we can't do this because our other employees won't like it, or we can't do this because our customers won't like it. That's out as an excuse. They can't say, well, we looked at it and we just, we didn't think we could do an accommodation. That's out as an excuse. Well, we only looked at this accommodation or the accommodation the employee suggested. That's out as an excuse. They've got to do a deep risk reward analysis, and they can't meet that. If undue hardship meant what it should have always meant in the words it was written in and how it was interpreted originally, then before these lower courts went AWOL, misinterpreting a throwaway phrase in a Supreme Court case that dealt with pension issues, didn't even deal with this, dealt with, there's specific protections for seniority pensions and seniority concerns as it relates to unionized contracts that are exempt from certain Title VII coverage. That was what that old case was. So it had nothing to do with the full context. It was misquoted. But lower courts were eager to protect employers. And in the process, they had been gutting religious discrimination cases for decades. And now we have robust religious discrimination laws that I don't think employers will be able to meet their standards for this vaccine mandate, because they have the problem right out of the gate, which we'll talk about in a bit here in the California case, that this didn't even stop spread. So there was no benefit of the vaccine mandate for employers. There was none. So they can't show that it was an undue hardship for them to accommodate something when the original mandate itself didn't serve its own purported purpose.
The bottom line, Robert, this was a case about it was USPS and whether or not it was undue hardship for them to schedule accordingly so that the religious guy doesn't have to work on Sunday. The theory is you're going to apply this mutatis mutandis to religious objections to not getting jabbed and what accommodations the company has to take in order to allow a person to remain unjabbed, work from home if you can. Maybe make a room for the unvaccinated, unjabbed.
And in fact, that's what it really ultimately should, because their only excuse, all these employers' only excuse, was to stop the spread. But they knew very early on the vaccine didn't stop the spread. So they don't even have any ground. They have no hardship from allowing the unvaccinated employee to work. None.
Was there any portion of the judgment, I think I've forgotten now, that discussed the sincerity of the belief? Because in a number of cases that we've seen, they say, yeah, we don't think your belief is sufficiently sincere.
Generally, courts can't do that. So and for people out there, religion is just a spiritual belief with a deep belief. It doesn't require an actual organized religion. You can be an atheist and assert discrimination based on religion. So it's based on deep spiritual beliefs is how it's defined. And courts are not supposed to second guess, and employers are not supposed to second guess the sincerity of the belief. You can guess whether it's a religious belief. So for example, somebody said, oh, I really need my tattoo. It's deeply important to me. At times courts would say, well, that's not really a deeply held spiritual belief about your tattoo. So there are some that do have a deeply spiritual held belief about a tattoo. Just like there's Sikhs, about beard, and there's a range of other provisions. And so generally that's not a grounds of defense either. This dealt a death blow to corporate employers trying to continue to deny relief and remedy to the unvaccinated, in my view. It's only a matter of time now before the cascading collapse of corporate defenses starts to accumulate. The smart ones will start writing checks and admitting their culpability. The dumb ones will be forced to get pounded into oblivion before they acknowledge their errors.
And speaking of which, Trader Joe's, what happened with Trader Joe's, Robert? I mean, we talked about it at the time. Your hatred for, or I should say disdain for Trader Joe's is exceeded only by your disdain for, what's that food company now? Tyson. What happened with Trader Joe lawsuit?
So this is one of the first cases we covered. This was the corporate employee who was fired a day or two after he said that he was going to talk to a lawyer about asserting his religious objection rights to Trader Joe's vaccine mandate that they were trying to force down everybody's throat at the company. And it went to summary judgment, and he won on the key retaliation claim. That, and one thing the court did a good job of is the court said, look, he requested a lawyer about religious discrimination. He told you he felt he was being religiously discriminated against, that he had made an informal claim, and he had no disciplinary history, and you fired him very soon afterwards. He goes, that's a very strong evidentiary inference that you retaliated against him. So he goes, that's going to a jury to decide whether that was why you fired him or not. And not long after that, Trader Joe wrote a check and settled the case.
All right. And the firefighter case?
Yes. So this is the firefighters who sued the city of LA, and one of your crazy judges in LA dismissed the case at what's called the demurrer stage. So that's like your old jurisdiction. So the California still operates on this. Like most states have motions to dismiss and so forth. California still has demurrers. I demur to the complaint. It's a very old proceeding. Used to be done in all the states. Now California and a few others. And the judge took judicial notice that the vaccines are so safe and effective that the firefighters couldn't sue. Because the firefighters sued saying, look, this was not even a rational policy. They said the COVID vaccine, because they sued after Omicron became was already developing. And they said, look, this doesn't even stop the spread. And that's your only excuse. And so, number one. Number two, they said you dig into the government's own documents, they're not saying it's safe and effective. They're saying maybe, but we really don't know. We really don't have a clue. And so, but the judge said, well, I hear. And so they're also suing that California has a very robust privacy protection. California's privacy protection is broader than the federal constitutional protection for privacy. And they sued saying, look, we're being threatened with the loss of our job. That's an invasion of our privacy when the condition of continued employment is to give up our bodily autonomy. And the California trial court said, nah, this is obviously compelling. I'll take judicial notice that the vaccines are safe and effective and publicly necessary. And the California Court of Appeals, which probably didn't want to do this, but it did it anyway, came in and said, you can't do that in California at the demurrer stage. We don't have federal plausibility standards for pleadings. We have to assume every single fact is true. Even if we think the fact alleged is implausible, it has to be assumed to be true. Even if the fact concerns medicine or science, we have to assume it's true. If somebody's suing because they say the moon is made of cheese, we have to assume at the demurrer stage the moon is made of cheese, and that this has been established for centuries in California, and the trial court didn't know what it was doing. But it went further than that. It said, if you look at the internal documents, it's not clear at all the COVID vaccine is safe and effective. I think their exact words was, the safety and efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines are subjects of reasonable dispute. This is now in the California Court of Appeals formal decision. That's helpful for a lot of people for a lot of purposes. And they said, look, you need to say, what is it safe and effective for? Because if the purpose of the law is to stop the spread, not to limit the severity, then there's lots of evidence this vaccine is not actually safe and effective. And that means it doesn't even meet rational basis, as the court said, for the purposes of the public policy challenge. And then in the privacy interest, they said is robust. And the mere fact that they hadn't yet had their body invaded doesn't matter because it's being threatened as a condition of continued employment, and that violates California privacy rights. That's sufficient to give you the right to bring the cause of action. So it reinstated the case to the trial court for full discovery and to say, let's dig into the medicine, let's dig into the science, let's dig into what the city was really up to. What did the city know? When did they know it? And they pointed out this virus has been evolving, so claims about safety and efficacy can be reasonably contested in general. And so it was very effective decision. Big win for the firefighters. To get it out of California state courts is really impressive, and some good language that can be used in a range of other cases.
I want to pull up this article, Robert, because we have the same issue in Canada. They're talking about a decision, doesn't really matter which one. We had multiple courts in Canada taking judicial notice of the safety and efficacy. This ruling by Justice, whatever the case was here, in at least 4 Ontario cases last year and 1 in Saskatchewan, judges have taken judicial notice of the safety and efficacy of COVID-19 vaccine for children and settled parental disputes over vaccination by ordering that the children involved be vaccinated. Robert,
and this is abuse of judicial notice.
Absolutely,
judicial notice
absolutely.
Very limited to, as this court repeated over and over again, undisputable facts. So, for example, they could take notice that the CDC said something. They cannot take notice of the truth of what the CDC said. They can't take notice of any fact that is in dispute at all. They can't take notice of, period. They can only take notice of undisputed facts. And undisputed facts are the United States was formed on X date, right?
That's what I was going to say. World War II ended on December, whatever,
right, there was a
1945.
treaty signed on this date. That's what judicial notice is there for, little procedural things so that you don't have to prove something that everybody knows is true. It is not there for courts to become super doctors and overrule the disputed evidence concerning a case.
I'm certain I saw 2 of those cases because my brother was talking about them at the time. They're talking about vaccinating children, and they said judicial notice of the safety and efficacy for children. It's mind blowing. All right, fascinating. That's fantastic, Robert. Let's get to the juicy one. People have lost their ever-loving minds, and it's like people don't really understand what was in the decision, because I said 2% of the people commenting have actually read the decision. It's probably wildly less than that. We're going to go to the Harvard admissions anti-Asian discrimination for the benefit of African-American students. I just want this line. The last stage of Harvard's admissions process, called the LOP, winnows the list of tentatively admitted students to arrive at the final class. Applicants that Harvard considered as cutting at this stage are placed on the LOP list, which contains only 4 pieces of information: legacy status, which I think people can rightly have a problem with, recruited athlete status, financial aid eligibility, and race. In the Harvard admissions process, quote, race is a determinative tip for, end quote, a significant percentage, quote, of all admitted African-American and Hispanic applicants. Robert, just before we get into the decision, which is the right decision, this is basically Harvard saying, we don't think any, I'm exaggerating because it's not all of the African-American and Hispanic students, just the majority of them or a lot of them. They think they couldn't find qualified African-American and Hispanic students. They all needed the tip up with their race. This is Harvard saying what they think of African-American and Hispanic students. It's not, they weren't combating racism. They are the racists engaged in overt discrimination and the soft bigotry of low expectations. Where for some reason, there's hundreds of millions of people in the States. The majority of the African-American and Hispanic students, they're there because of race, not because of qualifications. All right. You all know, everybody knows who's watching this, sort of the fact pattern. Harvard basically was using race not as a factor for the student, but as a prejudicial consideration against other students. So they were effectively penalizing Asian students, Asian American students, in the application process to favor